Chapter 782. The group observed it for a long time from 1 kilometer away, but they were unable to discover the profoundness behind it. Instead, when they saw wave after wave of people entering the light screen, they finally mustered their courage and came before it. The four of them tested it out, and Charlot pretended not to know anything. Eventually, their greed won over their rationality, and Yushan and the others decided to step into the light screen one by one. However, before they entered, Yushan persuaded, "Shinru, we don't know what's going on inside. Wait for us outside first." Shinru hugged Yushan's hand, swayed it, and said coquettishly, "Father, please bring me in. You're a level 29 conferred knight. How can ordinary experts be a match for you? Moreover, it'll be dangerous for me to stay outside alone." Yushan thought about it and agreed, but he could not stand his adorable daughter's coquettish behavior. He smiled bitterly and shook his head, thinking that he would protect his daughter even if he had to die. In the end, he brought Shinru along with him. Upon entering the formation, they felt as if the world was spinning, and time and space seemed to have become extremely chaotic. At the next moment, a chaotic imperial capital appeared before them. The entire imperial capital's appearance had changed. The streets were in a mess, like many mazes, and there were houses and walls that had been forcefully pieced together. The entire imperial capital seemed to be in someone's strange dream. Charlot knew that the entire imperial capital had been dragged out of the timeline by the Purple Mage King, turning into an existence that was like an alternate world. Any experts outside the imperial capital were no longer able to sense the situation within with their sudden inspiration. "There's no need to worry," Charlot explained. "Although it looks like there are changes, I've observed it in detail. The general structure of the entire imperial capital hasn't changed. I'll still be able to find the secret vault. Follow me." Under Charlot's lead, the group continued to head deeper into the imperial capital. Along the way, they also encountered other people. Thankfully, with Yushan around, the ordinary knights and conferred knights did not make a move on them. A few minutes later, Yushan's countenance suddenly changed. "Stop!" Everyone looked at him puzzled. However, Yushan looked toward a small alley at the side. Under everyone's astonished gazes, a white-haired old man walked out slowly. There were slightly distorted spatial ripples next to the old man, displaying his extremely majestic powers. Within his body, the roars of lions and tigers could be faintly heard. Yushan half knelt on the ground and said, "Greetings, Senior Beast God." Clade and Shinru's countenance also changed, and they half knelt on the ground and said, "Greetings, Lord Beast God." Seeing that Charlot was in a daze, Shinru quickly pulled him down and said, "Why are you in a daze? This is the Eastern Sand Region's Lord Beast God, the leader of the Myriad Beast Hall, a demigod expert with 4 tiers of perfection." The old man who was addressed as Beast God glanced at them and said, "So it's Yushan. For the sake of your father, I'll let it go." At the same time, he glanced at Shinru and chuckled. "Shinru, you're really getting better and better looking. The Eastern Sand Region's 5 golden flowers really do live up to their reputation." Due to Shinru's cute and mischievous looks, as well as her cultivation talent, she and the other 4 beautiful knights were known as the Eastern Sand Region's 5 golden flowers. She was the dream lover of countless young knights. As he spoke, the beast god disappeared from everyone's sight. Yushan let out a deep breath. Thank goodness, thank goodness. This beast god is getting more and more terrifying. He can probably attain a breakthrough to the divine level at any moment now. Shinru said in astonishment, "He can attain a breakthrough to the divine level at any moment now." Clade nodded and said, "The beast god is one of the top 5 experts in our Eastern Sand region. Although he lives in seclusion, his cultivation has never fallen behind. After the world's metamorphosis, his cultivation improved by leaps and bounds. It's said that the reason why he hasn't stepped into the divine level is because he wants to raise his cultivation to 5 tiers of perfection, enter that unprecedented realm, and strive for the divine level." Shinru's face frowned as she said worriedly, "Even he has come? It seems that there are really a lot of people gathered for the evil god ritual this time around." Father, are we still going to continue? A hint of hesitation appeared on Yushan's face. Charlot quickly persuaded. You guys don't have to be so worried. The imperial capital is very big, and it won't be so easy to encounter experts. Moreover, the secret vault we're heading to is very well hidden, and it's unlikely that we'll encounter those unparalleled experts. Under Charlot's persuasion, everyone was still tempted by the underground vault, and they once again headed deeper into the imperial capital. However, the beast god's appearance was like a signal, and everyone saw more and more experts. They even saw many conferred knights, and even demigods, fighting against each other. Terrifying thunderbolts cut across the sky, and explosive fist forces smashed a large area of the streets. Many buildings were sent flying into the sky. Lightning King, do you want to make an enemy out of our flying clouds peak? Crimson Hand, hand over the netherworld god Herb, and I'll spare your life. Furious bellows and furious howls rang out, and many battles broke out in the imperial capital. Charlot knew that it was because Alexander had scattered a large amount of rare treasures that the royal family had kept in the imperial capital. He wanted to incite countless experts to fight against each other, making use of their grievances, killings, and sacrifices to increase the success rate of the ritual. Under Charlot's guidance, the group carefully passed through many battlefields. Sometimes, when they encountered some ordinary conferred knights, they could also rely on Yushan's abilities to chase them away. The many battles made everyone increasingly astonished, and Yushanru could not help but want to retreat. However, she was stopped by Yushan. At this point, neither he nor Clade would be able to accept it if they did not take something with them. However, Charlot knew that it was too late even if they wanted to go back now. 3 hours later, the group finally arrived before a circular transparent crystal. The transparent crystal was like a big mirror, and it lay flat on an altar on the ground. Under Charlot's lead, the group stepped onto the crystal on the altar and instantly turned into a bolt of lightning, dissipating into the air. By the time everyone regained their senses, they had already appeared in a huge white square. It was unknown what the white square was made of. It looked boundless, and there was only a square that looked like jade under their feet. In the center of the square, there was a red vortex that kept on spinning to and fro. It looked like a vortex that was condensed from countless amounts of blood. At the bottom of the blood-colored vortex was an old man dressed in golden robes. His long sleeves drooped down to the ground, covering his entire palms. He wore a tall, golden crown on his head, and his beard was so long that it reached his chest. Many distorted shadows darted out from behind the old man. Those shadows looked very similar to the old man, just like how he looked when he was a child, when he was young, when he was middle-aged, and when he was old. This old man was the strongest expert in the gold-robed faction, a person who stood at the pinnacle of gold faction black magic, the Gold Mage King. Chapter 783. On the Jade White Square, the Gold Mage King stared at the blood-colored vortex above his head without blinking. It was as if all his attention was attracted by this blood-colored vortex. Other than Charlot's group, there were also several tens of experts from various factions in the square. There would even be new experts being teleported in occasionally. Everyone was wary of each other, and no one dared to get close to the blood-colored vortex. The weakest among these people was a second transition conferred knight. Some of them even knew each other or had grudges against each other. However, in this strange environment, no one dared to make a move. Moreover, the Gold Mage King was standing in the center. Who would dare to make a move before the Gold Mage King? Yushan frowned and asked, "Where is this place?" Charlot shook his head and did not say a word. He looked at the blood-colored vortex. It was the center of the ritual in his memories, the place where the evil god's clone was born. At the next moment, a white-haired old man spoke. It was the beast god whom Charlot and the others had encountered earlier. The beast god looked at the Gold Mage King and grinned, saying, "Gold Mage King, your mage association wants to summon an evil god. Such an existence isn't something we can covet. I've only come here to snatch some of the royal family's treasures. I have no intention of making an enemy out of your mage association." Although he said that, His eyes were filled with greed as he stared at the blood-colored vortex. Hearing this, the others also chimed in. Some of these experts were domineering, some were majestic, and some were ghostly. However, none of them dared to stand out against the Gold Mage King. An evil god's descent should be carried out in secret, but so many people know about it. Someone must have spread the news. It's either the Holy See of Truth who wants to gather people to stop it, or it's these people from the Mage Association who spread the news and want a blood sacrifice. Most of the people present were either elites from factions or Empire's knights who had many years of experience on the battlefield. None of them were fools. Although they had been tempted by the evil god's powers and the royal family's treasures, they were also hoping to benefit from the conflict between the two parties. Beast God, Night Sovereign, Deep Abyss Knight, Great Ferocious Demon. Seeing the many famous experts appearing here, Yushan was astonished. At the same time, he also regretted getting involved in this mess. He looked at Charlot and said hatefully, "You led the way." Charlotte forced a smile and said, "Don't worry, it'll be fine." He looked at Yu Xianru, who was beside him. The beautiful young lady's face was pale, and her fair forehead was wrinkled. Her bright eyes were filled with terror. Although Charlot knew that even without him, the trip to Yushan would still be doomed, he still felt guilty. At this moment, 2 more rays of light rose from the square, and 2 more people stepped in. The appearance of these 2 people finally caused the Gold Mage King's gaze to change a little. He looked at the 2 people who had just appeared. "Are you finally here?" The 2 people who had just appeared were both wearing platinum robes. Their long white hair seemed to flicker with a faint white light. Their red eyes were like rubies embedded in them, and there seemed to be volcanic waves churning in them. Charlot knew that these were the characteristics and abnormalities of the church country's aristocrats, the divine descendants. In particular, the white halo on their hair and the fiery light in their eyes were the characteristics of the pure-blooded divine descendants. Legend had it that from birth to death, even if they didn't undergo any cultivation, they would forever maintain their youthful appearance. They were said to be the descendants left behind by the god of universal truth in the mortal world and possessed the physique of a demigod. Therefore, although these 2 people appeared to be very young, no one present dared to underestimate their age. It was even possible that they were already over 100 years old. Among the 2 divine descendants, the man with a taller build and a head of blonde hair, tied into a ponytail, looked at the Gold Mage King and said calmly, "I am the Holy See of Truth Guardian King, death-revealing heavenly eyes. Lowly evil follower, stop the evil god ritual immediately. I'll grant you a peaceful death." The Gold Mage King smiled. "You're really as arrogant and foolish as the rumors say. If you're death-revealing heavenly eyes, then you must be darkness aberration, right?" The Gold Mage King looked at the other Guardian King and said, "That person was a divine descendant who was slightly shorter and appeared to be very thin and weak." Hearing the Gold Mage King's words, he lifted his head, threw a glance at the Gold Mage King, and said, "The new generation of Gold Mage King? You're as foolish as your predecessor. Stop the ritual. Your thoughts are meaningless, and your goals will never succeed. Everything you're doing is futile." Hearing the trio's conversation, the countenances of the other experts present kept on changing. The Gold Mage King, the strongest expert in the gold-robed faction, was already enough to make everyone tremble in fear. However, the Holy See of Truth, the Guardian King-level existences, death-revealing heavenly eyes, and darkness aberration were even more mythical and legendary characters. Almost everyone present had grown up listening to their legends. They were miracles, legends, and one of the signboards of the Holy See of Truth. "Is that so?" Hearing that, the Gold Mage King smiled. "Do you guys know Fangxing John?" Death-revealing heavenly eyes frowned. He recalled that someone had indeed reported that there was a sword arts genius by the name of Fangxing John in the Empire who wanted to work together with them. He was a genius who had been recommended by the Holy Orzen and could participate in the martial techniques grading plan. After they arrived at the Imperial capital's formation, they had scanned the Holy See of Truth's markings along the way and tracked them down to the center. However, The two Guardian Kings did not know that those were markings that Charlot had left behind along the way in order to guide the two Guardian Kings to the center as soon as possible. However, the Gold Mage King's words made Charlot feel that something was not right. Wait a minute. Based on my memory, the four Mage Kings should all be in the center of this formation. Why is it only the Gold Mage King? Charlot looked at the Gold Mage King, who was revealing a strange smile, and suddenly had a bad premonition. Outside the white jade square, the Black Mage King stood in void space. He opened his mouth and swallowed the lower half of a man's body, just like how a snake would swallow up a rat. The man's upper body was still exposed. It was a middle-aged man whose face was filled with sword scars. In their surroundings, there were large areas of empty space and distorted areas, showing the signs of a great battle between the two of them. As if understanding that he would be defeated, the man emitted eerie sword intents from all over his body. However, he still communicated with the Black Mage King through sword intents. Black Mage King, you went back on your word and launched a sneak attack on me. His Majesty won't let you off. Hee, sword slash of the secular world. Do you think that your Majesty doesn't know about this? The Black Mage King looked at the swordsman he had spoken of. This was one of the 10 great divine-level experts in the Empire and was also in existence who had been conferred the title of Prince by Alexander. The Black Mage King opened his mouth wide and once again swallowed the lower half of the man's body, leaving only sword slash of the secular world's head and neck outside. Intense distortions and light flashed in void space, and streams of sword intents slashed onto the Black Mage King's body. However, they could only leave behind streams of blood and were unable to hurt the Black Mage King at all. This previous supreme chief of the School of Sword Arts, in existence who was one of the 10 great divine-level experts in the Empire, was currently unable to resist the Black Mage King. Chapter 784. On the ground, there was a sea of corpses and corpses. The School of Sword Arts Supreme Chief, Hung Tianxiao, stood in a pool of blood, looking at the figure before him in despair. Even though he had already stepped into the second tier of the divine level and was able to move at close to light speed, he still could not sense any hope. It was because the monster before him was faster and stronger than him. In this formation in the imperial capital, in this alternate world that was independent from the timeline, he was like a canary trapped in a cage. It was impossible for him to even escape. Before him, the Red Mage King smiled, and with a light poke with his thick fingers, he opened up the skull of a conferred knight. The Red Mage King sucked on the brain matter as if he was sucking soup. However, he would occasionally look toward the sword slash of the secular world in the sky, and a hint of greed flashed in his eyes. Seeing that the Red Mage King did not take him seriously, a sharp gleam flashed in Hung Tianxiao's eyes. He disappeared with a swoosh, shattering into pieces and turning into a stream of martial will light wave that shot out. Escape, cry, scream. The Red Mage King laughed out loud, as if he was toying with his prey. With a swoosh, he gave chase. Each step he took brought about a myriad of air currents, and with each dash, his body kept on compressing space, bringing about distortions. He did not move at close to light speed, and merely chased after Hung Tianxiao at a leisurely pace, like a cat toying with a mouse. It was because no matter how fast Hung Tianxiao was, he had no way to escape in this cage that was independent from the timeline. Seeing that Hung Tianxiao and the Red Mage King had left, the sword slash of the secular world smiled and thought, escape. Think of a way to survive. No matter what. At the next moment, an extremely strong, attractive force came from the Black Mage King's body, drawing the sword slash of the secular world's body toward the Black Mage King's body. Seething sword intents were transmitted out from Hung Tianxiao's body. This Tier 3 divine level expert let out an enraged bellow, and his entire body started trembling. At Tier 3 of the divine level, one's martial will and physical body would be condensed into one, creating a body known as the conjured physique. At this stage, even if he were to casually create a clone, he would be able to exist for a long period of time. It would not be like how he had separated his martial will and had to reside in someone else's body. A Tier 2 Divine level expert would be able to move at a speed akin to light speed. A Tier 3 Divine level expert would possess a conjured physique and be able to casually create clones like Feng Xingjian. A Tier 4 Divine level expert would also possess the sudden inspiration premonition. It was harder for Divine level experts to die with each level. If it weren't for the fact that the Netherworld King was too confident and safe in the royal palace, and he wasn't willing to weaken his power to create a doppelganger, he wouldn't have been killed by Feng Xingjian with a single strike. Up till now, Feng Xingjian had only killed the Abyss Lord among the Tier 3 Divine level experts and above. Even though the World Annihilation Heavenly Lord had killed him twice, he had not been able to wipe out all of his consciousness. It was because the life-saving means of a divine level expert were each stronger than the previous. An existence like the sword slash of the secular world knew how brutal this battle would be. Therefore, he had left behind and hidden a clone of his conjured physique before the battle. Despite this main body contained 99% of his powers. After it died, it would suffer a great blow to its vitality. It was unknown how long it would take for him to cultivate it all over again. Right now, the sword slash of the secular world knew that he would not be able to keep this conjured physique. Therefore, he unleashed all the sword intents throughout his body. Countless cracks appeared on his conjured physique, and endless sword intents darted out from these cracks. Black Mage King, it won't be long before I come back to look for you. I hope that you'll still be as delicious as you are today. At the sight of this scene, the Black Mage King let out a cold laugh. He opened his mouth and engulfed the sword slash of the secular world. At the next moment, his body swelled up abruptly. It was as if countless sharp swords had burst out from his body, wanting to pierce through it. However, no matter how much his body swelled up or how big it was, there were no signs of it being damaged. The strongest part of Black Faction Black Magic isn't the body that keeps on getting stronger or the clone with zero mass. Instead, it's the engulfing power itself. The Black Mage King sensed that the sword slash of the secular world that he had engulfed kept on being depleted, and the corners of his lips curled up into a satisfied smile. The ability of Black Faction Black Magic was to keep on engulfing other lives to strengthen himself. However, compared to the process of strengthening, engulfing was his strongest ability. It was because no matter what kind of life it was, as long as it was engulfed into the Black Mage King's stomach, it would only end up being digested. In other words, the Black Mage King had yet to encounter a living creature that he could not eat up. In the Black Mage King's opinion, the best thing about this evil god's descent was that he would be able to eat to his heart's content. His abilities would be able to grow rapidly during this ritual. It should be about time for Feng Xingjian's side. The Black Mage King licked his lips and looked toward the other conferred knights in other directions. I'll have to hurry up as well. In the White Jade Square, the Gold Mage King looked in Charlot's direction. Under countless people's astonished gazes, he said, Guardian Kings, the two of you haven't seen Feng Xingjian's appearance before, right? Faced with the Gold Mage King's question, death-revealing heavenly eyes frowned, not understanding what the Gold Mage King meant by this. However, with a flash, the Gold Mage King appeared before Charlot. Seeing this legendary expert suddenly getting close, Yushan, Clade, and Yuxianru did not move at all. They did not dare to resist at all. In their eyes, an existence like the Gold Mage King was like a god from the heavens. How could they possibly dare to resist? Clade even shivered and immediately said, Lord Mage King, this guy was the one who brought us here. We definitely don't wish to become enemies with you, and we've never thought of stopping the ritual. Yushan glared fiercely at Clade, his eyes filled with disgust. However, the Gold Mage King had never cared about them. He patted Charlot on the shoulder and said with a smile, He's around, right? He tapped out a finger and slowly pierced toward Charlot's head. His tone remained extremely gentle. If he's unwilling to come out, then I'll invite him out. At the sight of this scene, Yushan's gaze struggled for a moment, but he still revealed a hint of helplessness. A hint of pity flashed in the eyes of an innocent young lady like Yu Xinru. No one present felt that a nameless young man like him would be able to survive after facing the Gold Mage King. Even the two Guardian Kings did not understand what the Gold Mage King was trying to do. However, at the next moment, a piercing sword light shot out from Charlot's head, colliding fiercely with the Gold Mage King's finger. In that instant, it was as if a myriad of microscopic black holes were formed and then disappeared in the microscopic world. Under everyone's astonished gazes, Fang Xingjian turned into a light figure and appeared on the white jade square. However, the Gold Mage King returned to the bottom of the blood-colored vortex with a flash. The corners of his lips curled up into a hint of a smile. Not long after Fang Xingjian appeared, death-revealing heavenly eyes and darkness aberrations' gazes changed as they looked at Fang Xingjian. Their gazes revealed disbelief, surprise, and blatant killing intent. Renegade died. Chapter 785. Accompanied by an explosive bellow from his martial will, death-revealing heavenly eyes punched out. His martial will crossed a tremendous force of several hundred meters at light speed and struck Fang Xingjian's body. This punch was unleashed in fury. Although it seemed like a casual punch, its power could break mountains and cleave them apart. It also contained a hint of the god of universal truth's prestige, enough to make any expert prostrate themselves in worship. However, just like the attacks from the Red Mage King and the others, the power that could shake mountains and rivers passed through Fang Xingjian's body. It was as if it had passed through a lump of illusions, extending out toward an unknown place. At the sight of this scene, the Gold Mage King's mouth opened as if he was laughing silently. His eyes were filled with satisfaction. As expected, the sudden inspiration's senses weren't wrong. Fang Xingjian will be of great help to us during the ritual. He can help us hold back those two Guardian Kings. If it wasn't because of the Chaos Witch's information, I really wouldn't have known that Fang Xingjian has such a connection with the Holy Sea of Truth. Then all the more he deserves to die. Charlot also looked at this scene in astonishment and shouted, "Death-revealing heavenly eyes, are you guys crazy?" Right now, the Mage Association is holding an evil god summoning ritual. Are you guys so free that instead of stopping the ritual, you want to make an enemy out of my master? When the others saw this scene, their countenances kept on changing. The situation was changing by the minute. First, it was the Gold Mage King, then the two Guardian Kings arrived, and then Fang Xingjian arrived. The strangest thing was that when the two Guardian Kings looked at Fang Xingjian, it was as if they were looking at an irreconcilable feud. The entire process was very confusing. Fang Xingjian did not seem to have noticed anything. He threw a cold glance toward death-revealing heavenly eyes and said, "Why did you attack me?" Death-revealing heavenly eyes did not reply him at all. However, the killing intent in his eyes when he looked at Fang Xingjian seemed to have materialized. "Renegade, do you think that no one will be able to stop you with just the art of light transformation?" As he spoke, he narrowed his eyes, and two black crosses appeared above each of his fiery red pupils. The system of divine arts of the Holy Sea of Truth was somewhat different from the system of black magic of the Mage Association. The 12 factions of black magic represented 12 different types of powers, and they were performed with different levels of black magic. The main process was to learn black magic and guide the evil god's powers. The Holy Sea of Truth, on the other hand, was praying to the god of truth every day, and one would receive all kinds of divine spells from the god of truth. These divine arts were endless, and almost everyone had their own unique divine arts. The Holy Sea of Truth's Dharmaraja possessed the most powerful divine incantation. Each of their code names was a tribute to the divine incantation they possessed. Almost at the instant the crosses appeared in death-revealing heavenly eyes, Fang Xingjian's sudden inspiration sensed an intense danger. With a flash, he turned into a stream of sword light and appeared 1,000 meters away. The space at his original location was replaced by a stretch of pure black. Then it was as if this space had disappeared, and the surrounding space was filled up like stretched cloth strips. In the end, there was only a small black dot left behind. Then, the small black dot also disappeared in an instant, as if it had never appeared. The entire process seemed very ordinary, but Feng Xingjian felt a strong sense of threat. This ability, he disintegrated all the matter in the entire space. No, it's not just disintegration. He removed all the fundamental forces, causing time and space to collapse, and then finally causing the great disintegration of matter. Matter and the disappearance of space-time are just as appearances. The reason is that he wiped out the fundamental forces that formed this world. At the thought of this, Feng Xingjian also felt astonished. With his current cultivation at Tier 4 of the Divine level and the Celestial Eradication Sword formation, he could only slightly affect electromagnetic forces, gravity, and strong forces. Yet this Guardian King before him had wiped out all the fundamental forces in a stretch of space. What kind of power was this? After all the fundamental forces were wiped out, the time and space in this area disappeared. It was as if they had returned to the singularity before the Big Bang, becoming an extremely small point that was eventually filled up by other spaces. Feng Xingjian suddenly thought, if he were to continue using this ability, wouldn't he theoretically be able to destroy the entire universe one day? Is this the divine spell that law emperors have grasped? At this moment, Feng Xingjian finally had a deeper understanding of the Guardian Kings of the Holy Sea of Truth. Through their divine arts, they grasped powers that far surpassed their own cultivation. It was the same for mages as well. It was just that Feng Xingjian was immune to black magic. However, when faced with divine arts, Feng Xingjian did not have any immunity. At the next moment, death-revealing heavenly eyes gaze swept over once again. Faced with a power that could wipe out fundamental forces and shrink a stretch of space into a singularity, even Feng Xingjian could only dodge. However, no matter how fast his gaze moved, it was impossible for him to be faster than Feng Xingjian. A stream of sword light in midair made a few consecutive turns and headed toward death-revealing heavenly eyes. It instantly pierced through death-revealing heavenly eyes' chest at light speed. The platinum long robes that the Guardian Kings were wearing were clearly some kind of divine remains equipment. However, when faced with Feng Xingjian's sword attack that contained the all-conquering sword intent, the platinum long robes shattered almost instantly. Death-revealing heavenly eyes' chest split open abruptly, and a large hole was opened up by Feng Xingjian. You're courting death. Death-revealing heavenly eyes was instantly enraged, and violent martial will gushed out. The surrounding space seemed to have started to change. This was an ability that he could only have at Tier 5 of the Divine level, unleashing his divine country. In his divine country, in order to complement the unique structure of his ability, he was confident that even if Feng Xingjian continued to move at light speed, he would still be able to wipe out Feng Xingjian. However, the space changed slightly. The appearance of hymns and white clouds had just appeared when they dissipated completely at the next moment. The Gold Mage King explained, "This place is outside of the original timeline and has become an alternate world that doesn't belong to this universe. Therefore, the divine country won't be able to be performed here." Therefore, at the next moment, death-revealing heavenly eyes gaze continued to chase after Feng Xingjian with the help of his martial will scanning. Feng Xingjian continued to shoot out at lightning speed, moving out of death-revealing heavenly eyes gaze time and time again while attempting to attack him. Darkness Aberration looked at this scene coldly. However, his martial will was locked onto the Gold Mage King, as if he was preventing the Gold Mage King from interfering. The Gold Mage King shrugged, seeming to indicate that he had no intention of interfering. It was true that he would not interfere. In his opinion, as long as they could drag out the time until the ritual was completed, they would be able to achieve a great victory. By then, no matter who it was, they would only be able to help them kill the evil god's clone. It was the same even for the two Guardian Kings. Looking at the myriad of sword light, the Gold Mage King smiled as well. "Feng Xingjian, I wonder how many clones you've left outside?" Speaking of which, this should have arrived by now. Chapter 786. The Gold Mage King had long since expected this situation. In fact, Charlot's existence was created by him and the Chaos Witch. The so-called rebirth was merely a memory that they had arranged together and stuffed into Charlot's mind. The royal family's monthly competition's outcome was controlled by them, and the Gold Mage King and the Chaos, which had long known about the secret meeting between the palace's four great experts, and stuffed it into Charlot's memories. True Lord Qingshan's sneak attack was bewitched by the Chaos Witch. Of course, it would be for the best if the sneak attack was successful. If not, it would also prove the authenticity of Charlot's memories. As for the Holy See of Truth's mark, the existence of Yushan, and the others, they were secretly arranged by the Chaos, which in order to lure Feng Xingjian and the two Guardian Kings to the center of the formation through Charlot and prevent them from fighting with the other Black Mage Kings and the others. The reason for this arrangement was that the Chaos, which was very clear about Feng Xingjian's background, his existence itself, was something that 2/3 of the Holy See of Truth could not tolerate. Right now, out of the 3 saints who were engaged in a chaotic battle, 2 of them, the Extraordinary Sons faction, which had previously strengthened the First Prince and the Fifth Prince's faction, and the death-revealing Heavenly Eyes and Darkness Aberrations leader Seiko Kaitian faction, would both be bent on killing Feng Xingjian. The Chaos, which understood this very well. To the 2 Guardian Kings, the evil god's clone was a threat. Feng Xingjian's existence was an irreconcilable feud. Although the Holy Orzen had seen Feng Xingjian's existence, the faction of saints that he belonged to was not willing to kill Feng Xingjian. Like the Chaos Witch, they had sealed off this news for some unknown purpose. However, in order to deal Feng Xingjian a serious blow, the Chaos, which had finally started to make use of this information and lured Feng Xingjian and the 2 Guardian Kings together in advance. This was so that she could make use of their strength to fight for time for the evil god ritual. Of course, they were only making use of Feng Xingjian's secret to fend off the 2 Guardian Kings from the Holy See of Truth. The Chaos Witch and the others had other ways to deplete Feng Xingjian's powers, deal him a serious blow, and suppress him. In the sky above the imperial capital, True Lord Qingshan, the First Prince, the Fifth Prince, and Alexander slowly appeared from the center of the Purple Formation. When they once again returned to this land, this universe, and this timeline, intense killing intent erupted from their bodies. Then the 4 of them turned into 4 rays of light and shot out in 3 directions at light speed. In the sky, the Chaos Witch watched as the 4 of them disappeared, and a faint smile appeared on her lips. She floated in midair like a cloud of smoke and sighed softly. The timeline will eventually be corrected, and the activation of the Ring of Time is unavoidable. Even you can't stop it, the current Feng Xingjian was indeed difficult to kill. A Tier 2 Divine level expert would be able to move at akin to light speed and would need to distort space in order to capture the other party. A Tier 3 Divine level expert would be able to create clones. If Feng Xingjian was careful enough, he would only be able to deal him serious injuries and would find it hard to kill him. It takes a whim to find it. A Tier 4 Divine level expert would also have the sudden inspiration ability and be able to foresee danger in advance. Furthermore, the Celestial Eradication sword formation that he had grasped could evade the weak points and attack the strong points. Regardless of whether it was the infiltrating void sword that could penetrate any attacks or defenses, the light pursuit sword that could allow one to turn into light, or the all-conquering sword that could slash through any martial will or conjured physique, they were all extremely powerful. The Celestial Eradication sword technique that Feng Xingjian had created allowed him to handle it with ease no matter how many people surrounded him. It could even be said that the more people surrounded him, the greater his advantage would be. It was because his sword arts would not be affected by other people's martial will, but the people surrounding him would have to interfere with each other. However, although there were almost no weaknesses in Feng Xingjian's sword arts and abilities, the Chaos Witch felt that there was a fatal weakness in his character. Your subordinates, the sense of responsibility that you still maintain, and the way you pretend to be a human and imitate human senses. You're really stupid." In the Xingwu region, Alexander descended from the sky. At the instant he arrived, the three divine-level experts, the blue sacred moonlight, the astral ancestor, and Lan Yu, were all slightly taken aback. A feeling of their hearts, palpitating, descended from the sky. Alexander instantly appeared in the hall. He looked at the three people in front of him with a cold look in his eyes. The blue sacred moonlight and the astral ancestor were two of the 10 divine-level experts in the Empire in the past. However, right now, they, along with the full moon shrine and myriad stars palace that they led, had submitted to Feng Xingjian. This was especially so for the blue sacred moonlight's granddaughter, Lan Yu. This great beauty who was famous in the Xingwu region, the first prince's fiancée and Alexander's daughter-in-law, had even had some unknown rumors with Feng Xingjian. To Alexander, the three people before him were all rebels. Therefore, he did not hesitate at all and struck out a punch. His martial will turned into a black light and swept out toward the three of them. He did not use Atom Shroud because he needed Feng Xingjian to be able to react. This attack also contained the comprehensions he had gained from cultivating in seclusion during this period of time. All of the power of his martial will enter deep into the microscopic world, bringing with it a power that could shatter everything physical. This allowed him to directly attack Feng Xingjian's body, which was in light form. "Come on out, Feng Xingjian!" Simultaneously, the first prince and the fifth prince had already turned into two streams of light and landed in the sky above the northern ice region. After true Lord Qingshan's guidance and the extraordinary sun strengthening, their strength had improved by leaps and bounds. First of all, true Lord Qingshan had used 3,000 nuclear missiles with a power of 10 million tons to recover their powers, pushing all of them to Tier 2 of the divine level. He had also taught them a world-shaking martial technique called the 4 Absolutes, 2 Hegemons, and 1 Annihilation. The extraordinary sun had bestowed upon them the power of a divine art. Streams of milky white light burned on their bodies like flames. This was the power of the God of universal truth, but had been fixed onto their bodies by the extraordinary sun. This allowed them to borrow the God of universal truth's power and unleash 3 attacks that were equivalent to the full-powered attacks of a Tier 4 divine-level expert. After this attack was amplified by the 4 Absolutes, 2 Hegemons, and 1 Annihilation, its destructive prowess rose in a straight line. In the blink of an eye, they arrived at the northern ice region. The two of them flew in different directions, one in the east and one in the south, heading toward the direction that the chaos which had informed them of. Right now, the northern ice region was completely under the control of the 7 great clans. The 7 great clans, including their leaders, clan head Jacob, had all submitted to Feng Xingjian. With a sway of his body, the 5th prince appeared before the Holy Light clan's head, Jacob. Without giving Jacob any chance to react, the 5th prince punched out. It was the martial technique that true Lord Qingshan had imparted to him. The 4 Absolutes, 2 Hegemons, and 1 Annihilation. The 3 worlds' eradication. Using the God of universal truth's power to propel the 3 worlds' eradication, a single punch contained the power to instantly kill a Tier 3 divine-level expert, inflict serious injuries on a Tier 4 divine-level expert, and even force a Tier 5 divine-level expert to avoid it temporarily. Although there were only 3 attacks like this, to Jacob, this was already an attack that could cause him to feel despair. The first prince landed in a small courtyard. The person who appeared before him was the Northern Ice region's top beauty, Audrey, who had once helped Feng Xingjian obtain the 10th level of the mystical prince. Chapter 787. At this moment, Audrey's brows were slightly furrowed as she stared blankly at a pot of flowers in the courtyard. Right now, Audrey still appeared very graceful. Her face was as fair as the white snow in the world, and her pair of big eyes were trembling slightly, looking like a lake on a grassland. She wore a white fur robe on her body and leather pants and boots on her lower body. Her long black hair draped over her shoulders, making her look enchanting and elegant. There was an indescribable sexiness to her that was enough to release a fatal attraction to anyone. However, when faced with such a beauty, the first prince still did not show any hesitation. He also used the three worlds eradication, which was propelled by the god of universal truth's powers, and smashed out a punch toward Audrey without any mercy. Regardless of whether it was the first prince or the second prince, the fist arts they performed did not seem to contain any worldly aura. They were just like ordinary fists cutting across the air. However, they were the only ones who knew that with true Lord Qingshan's imparting and the reinforcement from the extraordinary sun, their fist arts would have a destructive prowess against the microscopic world for at least the next 3 punches. The destructive prowess of a divine-level expert, which was at the level of a nuclear warhead at the beginning, moved on to the level of ripples that were at the level of spatial distortions, and then moved on to the microscopic world, was getting more and more terrifying with each passing level. However, the first prince was deeply immersed in this power at the microscopic level. Compared to the attacks that could easily destroy mountains, incinerate seas, or distort space, the destructive prowess of the attacks at the microscopic level right now was many times stronger. The ordinary fist landed on Audrey inch by inch. It was like a palm that wanted to snap a fresh flower, about to wipe out Audrey's existence. In the sky above the Great Western Region's Regional Academy, true Lord Qingshan's actions were even greater than the others. It was because neither Alexander nor the 2 princes were able to affect a large area with their destructive attacks at the microscopic level. In order to achieve such destructive prowess, they had to restrict their powers to a very small area. However, true Lord Qingshan did not mind. He set up the duality minute formation. In almost an instant, the entire Great Western Region's Regional Academy was encompassed by the duality minute formation. Before anyone could react, 2 surges of air currents, one bright and one dark, one left and one right, one up and one down, one clear and one turbid, appeared in void space. At the next moment, the chaotic air currents extended out in all directions, wanting to encompass the entire Regional Academy. True Lord Qingshan wanted to wipe out the entire academy with a single strike, wiping the entire academy and the people within it off the map. Fang Xingjian is too difficult to deal with. Even if I can gain the upper hand in a battle against him, there's nothing I can do if he wishes to escape with his light transformation ability, light speed movement, and sudden inspiration ability. But now, Fang Xingjian, you could try to escape. In the sky above the imperial capital, the Chaos Witch's eyes revealed a look of great wisdom. The evil god summoning ritual that was set up in the sky above the imperial capital and the purple Mage King's formation had separated the entire imperial capital from the timeline. This meant that Fang Xingjian's sudden inspiration could not sense the killing intent and hostility of Alessandra and the others who were hiding inside. The moment they returned to this world, there were 2 possibilities. The smallest possibility was that Fang Xingjian had not left any clones outside, and all of his powers had entered the ritual's area of effect. Therefore, he would not be able to sense the dangers in the universe he was originally in. The greatest possibility was that Fang Xingjian had left a clone outside, and only a portion of his powers had entered the formation. Therefore, Fang Xingjian would definitely be able to sense the hostility and the danger his subordinates were in. At this moment, the 4 divine-level experts would all appear in different locations at light speed and then attack fiercely. If Fang Xingjian wished to stop the 4 of them, he would have to split his powers into 4 as well. Moreover, as the 4 of them were attacking Fang Xingjian's subordinates directly, he would have to fend off their attacks if he wished to stop them. He would have no choice but to go head-on against the 4 of them. This was equivalent to forcing Fang Xingjian to split his powers to fight against the enemies. With this, the ritual would be able to proceed smoothly. The Guardian King would be fended off by Fang Xingjian, and Fang Xingjian's powers would be greatly depleted. He might even suffer from serious injuries. To the Chaos Witch, this was already the most perfect outcome. As for whether Fang Xingjian would disregard the lives of his subordinates, he definitely will. The Chaos Witch smiled. Having his emotions sealed, he merely imitates human behavior. It's too easy to predict the behavior of a person like him. It's because he has almost no emotions. To him, everything is a yes or no. If his subordinates are attacked, he'll have to save them. This is the behavior that humans are proud of. And he, who imitates this behavior, won't make a second choice. However, just then, the Chaos Witch's expression suddenly went into a daze. She looked at the Purple Mage King and Lilia, who were slowly crawling out from the ritual, and a hint of uncertainty flashed at her eyes. Simultaneously, 10,000 meters above the sky in the central region, Feng Xingjian had also sensed the existence of danger. He was unable to know the situation in the ritual formation because it was an existence that had broken away from this universe's timeline. However, he was able to clearly sense the sudden appearance of 4 waves of danger. Lan Yu, Jacob, Audrey, and the entire regional academy is in danger. Almost at the moment Alexander and the other 3 stepped out of the formation, Feng Xingjian sensed danger. When the 4 of them arrived at their destination at light speed, Feng Xingjian did not hesitate to split up his powers once again. This time around, in order to interfere with the evil god summoning ritual, he had left behind a clone. It was because he had already started to have doubts when Charlot had mentioned the information about her rebirth. Therefore, he had never truly believed that Charlot had been reborn. However, no matter how much he doubted it, he had no choice but to split up a portion of his powers into the formation to find out what was going on. He split up 50% of his powers. It was because to Feng Xingjian, 50% of his powers was a relatively safe number. It was because, based on his judgment, 50% of his powers would be sufficient to allow him to escape from any attacks. The 2 divine swords, the Thunder Calamity and Abyss, as well as the 200 white bone swords, were also left outside, ready to provide reinforcements should any accidents happen. Right now, faced with 4 waves of danger simultaneously, Feng Xingjian naturally chose to block all of them. This was his code of conduct. There was no hesitation, no consideration, only yes or no. Since he wanted to save all of them, he did not plan on sacrificing any of them. Therefore, he split up his powers once again, leaving behind 50% of his powers. 20% of his powers went to the Great Western region to stop true Lord Qingshan. Another 20% went to the Xingwu region to stop Alexander, and the remaining 10% went to the Northern Ice region. The remaining 5% went to stop the first prince and the second prince respectively. The 4 waves of powers split up almost at the same time the 4 of them appeared. Then they appeared in 3 regions almost at the same time as the 4 of them. Chapter 788. In the snowy mountains of the Northern Ice region, the 5th prince landed before the head of the Holy Light clan, Jacob. This strongest expert among the 7 great clans did not have the sudden inspiration ability. Therefore, he was unable to react to the first attack. The 5th prince's fist contained a strange magical power. The powers of the god of universal truth exuded milky white flames on his fist, pushing out the 3 worlds' eradication. The destructive prowess of this punch directly affected the microscopic world. It could tear apart light, destroy physical particles, and destroy any life he wanted to destroy. When Feng Xingjian arrived, he followed the instructions of his sudden inspiration and stood before Jacob. He struck out a finger almost at the same time as the 5th prince. All-conquering sword. Bang! The fist and finger collided. Feng Xingjian, who only had 5% of his powers, was pushed back repeatedly when faced with the 3 worlds eradication, which the 5th prince had pushed out with the powers of the god of universal truth. Even though the all-conquering sword, which could slash through everything in the world, was pushed out with 5% of its powers, it only left behind a sword mark on the 5th prince's finger before coming to a stop. It was still able to slash through everything in the world, but the power it pushed out was too little compared to the 5th prince's god of universal truth and the 3 worlds eradication. It was just like how no matter how sharp a saber or sword was, it would still require sufficient power to swing it. Kacha-kacha sounds kept ringing out in void space, and many cracks appeared on Feng Xingjian's body. His entire arm was almost completely shattered. At the sight of this scene, the fifth prince's eyes were filled with great elation. Violent martial will soared into the sky, mixing with the powers of the god of universal truth and striking out toward Jacob once again. A power that wanted to destroy the three worlds and shatter everything came gushing out through the fifth prince's fist. Fang Xinjian, to think that such a day would come for you. Take another punch from me. He could neither dodge nor escape. He could only take it head-on with 5% of his powers. An explosive bang rang out in his will, and Fang Xinjian's other arm shattered completely as well, turning into countless specks of dust that scattered out incessantly. Ha ha! The fifth prince's martial will flashed with endless ecstasy and joy. Looking at Fang Xinjian, who could not even withstand a single blow, the fifth prince felt that his entire body's will was so comfortable as if it was going to fly up. Even his powers seemed to have improved. Don't worry, after I kill you, I will help you take care of all your women. Without giving his opponent any chance to catch his breath, the fifth prince's third attack landed. He wanted to kill, or at least severely injure Fang Xinjian's clone within 3 attacks. In the courtyard in the northern ice region Sun City, just as the first prince punched out toward Audrey, Fang Xinjian also arrived. Tapping out with a finger, he sent out a myriad of sword light sweeping out toward the first prince who had punched out. However, right now, the light pursuit sword, which was propelled with only 5% of its powers, was like glass under the first prince's fist, unable to resist at all. A myriad of shattering sounds rang out in Fang Xinjian's will. A myriad of sword lights were instantly shattered, and the first prince's fist had already landed on Fang Xinjian's body. With an explosive bang, Fang Xinjian's chest caved in. However, Fang Xinjian did not care and tapped out toward the first prince's head with an infiltrating void finger. The first princes will emitted a series of maniacal laughter. It's useless. You're thinking of using such a small amount of power to stop me? Fang Xinjian, the most foolish thing you've done in your entire life is to make an enemy out of me. To make an enemy out of the Krieg royal family. The entire empire is mine. The entire world is going to be mine. What on earth are you thinking? To think that you want to make an enemy out of me. The milky white light burst out once again, and the god of universal truth's powers continued to propel the power of the 3 worlds' eradication. It crushed all the particles and waves in the microscopic world incessantly and attacked Audrey's body once again. In the Xingwu region, a pure white palm blocked before Alexander. Fang Xinjian, who had 20% of his powers, broke through the other party's attack. Then an all-conquering sword swept out, slashing out toward Alexander. However, right now, Alexander was completely different from how he had been during the battle in the palace. Right now, Alexander could already unleash destructive prowess at the microscopic level. When he used the power of this realm to propel Adam's Shroud, this strongest divine equipment of the Krieg royal family displayed unrivaled power. There was no need for time, and it would hit its target immediately. When Fang Xinjian tapped out with his finger, Adam's Shroud had already swept onto his body. Fang Xinjian, who only had 20% of his powers, was instantly sent flying. And it swept out again. It would hit its target immediately, dealing with Fang Xinjian, who had 20% of his powers. Right now, Alexander kept striking out attack after attack onto Fang Xinjian's body. Each attack caused Fang Xinjian's conjured physique to crack, and his powers were depleted rapidly, allowing Adam's Shroud to sweep onto his body time and time again. Fang Xinjian slashed out with his sword again in midair. Instant sword. A sword mark suddenly appeared on Alexander's body, but it only managed to slash open a wound with a radius of 1 inch. In almost the time it took for a single breath, Alexander healed the wound. Too weak. Too weak. Fang Xinjian, you're too weak. Alexander looked at Fang Xinjian, who was being suppressed in all aspects. He was like an aloof god as he sighed and said, "How can you be so weak? How can you be so pitifully weak? Have a good feel of your powerlessness." As Fang Xinjian spoke, Adam's Shroud had already wrapped up Fang Xinjian. chaotic air currents descended from the sky above the great western region. However, Feng Xingjian's sudden inspiration was gushing out incessantly. It was as if his entire body, his entire consciousness, the entire world, and even the entire world were telling him that the prowess of his life was about to arrive. At this moment, although Feng Xingjian only had 20% of his powers, he possessed his strongest sword. The Thunder Calamity, Abyss, and White Bone sword all appeared in void space. The Celestial Eradication sword formation was activated successfully in that instant, bringing along over 1,000,000 streams of all-conquering sword intents and clashing fiercely against the duality minute formation. Loud rumbling sounds kept on ringing out in true Lord Qingshan's and Feng Xingjian's wills. It was as if the heavens were to collapse and the earth was to shatter, ringing out in their consciousness. Countless microscopic black holes appeared and disappeared at the point where the two formations clashed. If the power of this attack were to be unleashed explosively, it would be sufficient to destroy the entire Great Western region. Feng Xingjian, true Lord Qingshan, was extremely agitated, and there seemed to be hints of bloody light appearing in his eyes. Right now, in his eyes, Feng Xingjian was an irreconcilable enemy. Feng Xingjian had cut off his fantasy system, and true Lord Qingshan wished that he could devour his flesh and bones. Under the push of violent wills, the entire duality minute formation seemed to be seething. A tremendous amount of chaotic air currents were released from the microscopic world, slanting toward the ground. From Feng Xingjian's position, it was as if the entire sky had collapsed. The 4 long swords on his back emitted world-shaking sword light, and the Celestial Eradication sword formation was activated at full power. Even if the sky were to collapse, he would lift it back up. Chapter 789. The Celestial Eradication sword formation was the strongest power that Feng Xingjian currently possessed. After activating the power of the sword formation, coupled with his sword arts realm, he could even kill a Tier 5 divine level expert, just like how he had done during the battle in the palace earlier. Right now, even though Feng Xingjian only had 20% of his powers in the Great Western region, when he activated the Celestial Eradication sword formation, his battle prowess would still be unrivaled. This was also what Feng Xingjian was relying on. As long as he could defeat true Lord Qingshan here, he would be able to take back the powers here and then crush the other 3 battlefields. It was also because true Lord Qingshan's powers were too strong that he had brought the sword formation here. Otherwise, the entire academy would instantly be annihilated. Majestic sword cheese soared into the sky, and the powers of all physical particles and ether particles within a range of 100,000 meters exploded simultaneously. They soared into the sky with the all-conquering sword intent, clashing fiercely with the chaotic air currents of the duality minute formation. On one side was the all-conquering sword that could slash through light waves and martial will. On the other side was an attack that could use chaotic air currents to wipe out all matter, turning all matter into energy. When the two of them clashed, the sword intents in the sky kept on shattering, and the chaotic air currents also dissipated rapidly. Both parties had reached the microscopic level, and they were evenly matched in their attacks that could enter the microscopic world with their powers. There seemed to be crackling sounds ringing out incessantly in the air. It was as if a myriad of glasses had shattered, or as if the tectonic plates in the depths of the Earth's crust were trembling. Even an ordinary person would be able to sense an extremely terrifying power erupting in the depths of space. Again, the chaotic air currents in the sky seethed. Unable to succeed in his first attack, the killing intent in true Lord Qingshan's eyes grew even stronger. The potential that Feng Xingjian displayed was far too terrifying. This was especially so now that he no longer had his system. If he could not kill Feng Xingjian today, he would probably never be able to kill Feng Xingjian ever again. The chaotic air currents instantly turned into a fist that could encompass the entire academy. An overwhelming fist came smashing down with true Lord Qingshan's actions. If this punch were to come smashing down, it would be enough to turn the entire academy into dust, and the energy transformed from the destruction of matter would be enough to blow up a large part of the Great Western region. Facing this terrifying attack, Fang Xingjian's expression turned extremely serious. The Abyss Sword, the Thunder Calamity Sword, and the White Bone Sword began to tremble violently. The four swords brought up a shocking scene in the air and turned into a terrifying sword shadow that could rival the Himalayas. Fang Xingjian could not perform light pursuit or infiltrating void because if he would dodge true Lord Qingshan's attack, the academy under his feet would turn into dust. Therefore, he could only activate the all-conquering sword, piercing toward the sky along with a sword shadow that was like a tall mountain. It pierced out fiercely toward the huge fist with a world-splitting aura. The tip of the sword and the surface of the fist collided fiercely, and strong gales instantly swept through the entire area within a range of 500 leagues from the Great Western City. Densely packed black holes appeared and disappeared at the location where the two attacks collided. Countless physical particles and ether particles were sucked into the miniature black holes and disappeared. They had both entered deep into the microscopic world, using their own powers to interfere with the attacks of the microscopic world. When the realm of their attacks was the same, the fight became a battle of pure energy depletion. Both the sword shadows and the chaotic air currents were depleted rapidly in the fight. However, the chaotic air currents were clearly more majestic than the sword shadows. After all, Fang Xingjian had lost 80% of his powers and was unable to break through the duality minute formation head-on. Moreover, this time was different from the siege in the palace. Although he was being attacked from all sides, he was able to avoid the weak points and attack the strong points, using the light pursuit sword and infiltrating void sword to engage in guerrilla warfare. Right now, Fang Xingjian could only clash head-on with true Lord Qingshan. He was unable to perform the light pursuit and infiltrating void sword intents. Break! His will seethed wildly, and even more chaotic air currents appeared on true Lord Qingshan's body. All the powers inside and outside of his body were unleashed explosively, not holding back at all. The huge fist flashed, bringing along hints of fluorescent light. It pressed down on the sword shadows, causing creaking sounds to ring out and even starting to shatter bit by bit. At the sight of this scene, true Lord Qingshan finally heaved a sigh of relief. At the same time, he felt a lingering fear. To think that he has such a battle prowess, even though he has only split off a portion of his powers? This Fang Xingjian's potential is truly unfathomable. Simultaneously, his will seethed fiercely, and he started to shout at Fang Xingjian. Fang Xingjian, you're dead meat. However, I'm a merciful person. I'll give you a chance now. Return my system to me, and I can spare your life. In his opinion, as the chaotic air currents descended inch by inch, victory was already in his grasp. Therefore, he naturally had to think of a way to get Fang Xingjian to return his system to him. Looking at the chaotic air currents that were slowly pressing down, Fang Xingjian's countenance turned even colder. Fool! You better think about how you're going to survive. Today, it won't be just you. Alexander, the first prince, the fifth prince. All of you will have to die. Stubborn. True Lord Qingshan let out a cold snort. Since that's the case, I'll first beat you up half to death, and then crush your subordinates into dust. Let's see if you'll agree or not then. The pressure coming down from the sky grew increasingly greater. However, Fang Xingjian suddenly pointed toward the academy on the ground. In that instant, a stream of sword chi soared into the sky, bringing along waves of strange and mysterious sword intents that contained the connection between the microscopic world and the macroscopic world. It was a long sword that had been modified from the Panwu divine armor. A long silver shuttle was floating on Fang Qian's and Wang Xiaoyan's workbench. Although Fang Qian and the others had received guidance from Fang Xingjian and had imparted them with the unrivaled profoundness of electromagnetic forces, strong forces, and gravity, it was still impossible for them to successfully forge a divine sword within such a short period of time. Right now, this divine sword that had been modified from the Panwu heavenly raiment was just an embryo. It looked like a long shuttle and did not look like a long sword at all. However, as Fang Xingjian pointed across space, the long shuttle started to tremble intensely. With a flash, it turned into a stream of sword light that cut across the sky and appeared before Fang Xingjian. Simultaneously, a white bone sword suddenly shattered, turning into countless streams of light that shot out toward the silver shuttle, while bringing along the newest light pursuit sword intense. Fang Xingjian did not have the time to do it slowly. He used the most violent and brutal method to stuff the light pursuit sword intent into the silver shuttle. In that instant, the silver shuttle also underwent an abrupt transformation. Its entire body seemed to have turned into a liquid state, stretching and expanding incessantly. In the end, it turned into a silver longsword that kept on seething and rolling about. This longsword seemed to be formed from silver lava, and the entire sword was a silver liquid that kept on seething, bubbling, and seething. Lines of profound words would occasionally appear in the liquid. They were the profoundness of electromagnetic forces, gravity, and strong forces in a microscopic world. Although the time was short and a large amount of the Panwu heavenly raiment power and materials were wasted, when the sword took form, it still emitted waves of world-shaking aura. It was an aura that could be comparable to that of a Tier 4 divine level expert. Chapter 790. All right, you're from the Panwu heavenly raiment and have the profoundness of the microscopic world integrated into it. Let's call it the Panwei sword. In that instant, the Panwei sword burst out with sword light, completely integrating into the celestial eradication sword formation. Then, with the power of the divine sword, the prowess of the celestial eradication sword formation increased once again. This time around, it was not just the energies of physical particles and ether particles that were being drawn out. The power of the sword formation entered deep into the physical particles, drawing out the powers of the even finer particles. As the prowess of the celestial eradication sword formation increased, the countenance of true Lord Qingshan, who was in the sky, changed abruptly. Under his astonished gaze, the sword shadow in the sky emitted a bright glow and started to push up the chaotic air currents. Amidst his fury, true Lord Qingshan activated his powers fiercely. Chaotic air currents kept on exploding, and crackling sounds of explosions rang out incessantly in the space. However, it was useless. He could only watch as the sword's shadow pressed down bit by bit. How is this possible? It's impossible. The duality minute formation should be invincible among those below Tier 5 of the divine level. The duality minute formation's limit of interference toward the microscopic world for those below Tier 5 of the divine level is the duality minute formation. How can it possibly fail? How can it possibly fail? Could it be that I can't even go up against a small portion of Fang Xingjian's powers? Panic gradually appeared in true Lord Qingshan's eyes. This was a situation he had never encountered before. As the sword's shadow pressed closer and closer, the chaotic air currents in the sky started to collapse, and the huge fist showed signs of collapsing. Unlike true Lord Qingshan's side, Alexander's side had the upper hand. Faced with Fang Xingjian, who only had 20% of his powers, Alexander felt no pressure at all. Adam's shroud, which hit its target with every attack, wrapped up Fang Xingjian entirely. Golden flames started burning fiercely on the shroud. It was Saint Adam's remnant powers. Endless powers were activated, unleashing destructive powers at the microscopic level toward Fang Xingjian. Alexander, who had activated Adam's shroud, could clearly sense that in the first instant, all the air and physical particles in the space within Adam's shroud had been shattered. In that instant, it was as if over 100 nuclear missiles had exploded simultaneously within the space that was not even 1 cubic meter. Terrifying powers seethed to and fro, attempting to tear Fang Xingjian's body apart. But this was not enough, far from enough. Alexander sneered and raised both his hands up high, transforming them into a huge black millstone. He unleashed his full strength and smashed it towards Fang Xingjian, who was covered by Adam's shroud. This time around, the destructive prowess of the full-powered, overturned hell reached deep into the microscopic world. This was the pinnacle attack of a Tier 5 divine level expert. Everywhere it passed, apart from time itself, everything seemed to be shattered into pieces. Alexander, who had unleashed this attack, could not help but feel emotional. His overturned hell was truly the peak of his entire life. The destructive prowess of this attack directly affected the microscopic world, and it could cause irreparable damage to any material matter. Even Feng Xingjian, who was wrapped in Adam's shroud, would be severely injured. The Black Mage King is right. Previously, I wasn't able to unleash the true powers of a Tier 5 divine level expert. In fact, the fact that I was able to create a divine country shows my ability to interfere with the material world. From the Black Mage King, Alexander gained a deeper understanding of the destructive prowess of a divine level expert. Only by evolving from the great destruction of a wide area to the destructive prowess of spatial distortions, and then to the destructive prowess of the microscopic world, could one be considered to have reached a higher level. For those below Tier 5 of the divine level to be able to use their own powers to interfere with the microscopic world, this is the pinnacle of destructive prowess. In order to progress further and truly be able to directly control and freely control the powers of the microscopic world, one would need to have a cultivation of at least Tier 5 of the divine level. This means that this attack of mine, excluding divine arts, black magic, and other abilities, is already the limit of my current destructive prowess. It's a punch at the pinnacle. It's a pity that I won't be able to fight against Feng Xingjian in his best condition. At this moment, Alexander suddenly felt a sense of regret. He had reached the pinnacle, but he did not have a chance to wipe away his humiliation and fight against Feng Xingjian in his best condition. To this sovereign who had dominated the empire for over 30 years, this brought him an endless sense of regret. It was because at this moment, he felt that even if he were to fight against Feng Xingjian alone, he would still have a chance to win. It's a pity that after this battle, you no longer have the right to challenge me. The three divine level experts, the Lanshan Moonlight, the Astral Ancestor, and Lan Yu, finally reacted to the battle between Feng Xingjian and Alexander, who was moving at close to light speed. Seeing that Alexander was being suppressed, the countenances of Feng Xingjian changed. However, each of them still performed their ultimate moves, relying on the senses of their martial wills to attack Alexander's position. However, Alexander paid no heed to the attacks from the three of them. To him, their attacks were just like the bites of bugs. Right now, all of his attention was placed on Feng Xingjian, immersed in the regret of not being able to fight against Feng Xingjian in his best condition. As the feelings of regret rose in his heart, Alexander's attacks became even more vicious. His fists turned into a lump of pitch-black darkness that kept on twisting and spinning. It was as if countless agonizing cries and furious bellows could be heard ringing out from it, as if countless vengeful spirits were howling from within. The overturned hell, which was activated at full power, took effect in that space that was not even 1 cubic meter in size, surrounding and suppressing Feng Xingjian, who was in the microscopic world. To Alexander, who had unleashed his full power, this was his way of expressing his regret. The more regretful he was, the more vicious his attacks would be. If I were to kill you today, I'll feel regret. But if I don't kill you today, I'll only feel even more regret. In the northern ice region, the fifth prince finally struck out the third attack of his three worlds eradication. Amidst the world-annihilating aura, his fist, which contained a terrifying power, landed lightly on Feng Xingjian's chest. In almost an instant, Feng Xingjian's entire chest was shattered from this attack, and his clone, which only had 5% of his powers, suffered from serious injuries after these three attacks. Sensing that the god of universal truth's powers on his body had completely dissipated, the fifth prince stopped his attacks. He clenched his right hand into a fist and placed it by his waist. He stood 100 meters away from Feng Xingjian, staring at Feng Xingjian as he continued to scheme in his heart. Although the fifth prince had dealt serious injuries to Feng Xingjian's clone, he had also depleted the god of universal truth powers for 3 attacks. He still had to make a judgment on what would happen next. As long as he recovers slightly, I'll retreat immediately. After all, there are others who are still pestering him. But if he doesn't recover, the fifth prince still understood how to take advantage of his opponent's weakness to take his life. Therefore, under Jacob's astonished gaze, Feng Xingjian and the fifth prince suddenly appeared. Then Feng Xingjian, who had always been undefeatable, suffered from serious injuries from 3 punches. Even his conjured physique, which was covered in cracks, showed no signs of recovering. How could this be? He could not understand how the fifth prince had suddenly won against Feng Xingjian. Then the fifth prince punched out across space. It was the tyrant fist that he had created himself. The fist force and sword intense collided in midair and then dissipated. It took 3 streams of all-conquering sword intense to shatter the fifth prince's probing punch. At the sight of this scene, the corners of the fifth prince's lips curled up into a savage smile. Chapter 791. Streams of sword light kept on flashing to and fro before Audrey, fending off the first prince's fist force. Due to Audrey being behind him, Feng Xingjian was unable to perform the light pursuit or the infiltrating void sword technique. He could only keep on performing the all-conquering sword to fight against the first prince. It was a pity that his clone, which only had 5% of his powers, appeared to be in pieces after receiving 3 attacks from the 3 worlds eradication. His entire body was filled with light spots that kept on shattering and dissipating. With a maniacal laugh, he struck out another punch. He did not perform the martial arts of the ancient path of hell, but used his own powers to propel the 3 worlds eradication. His entire fist seemed to have turned into nothingness. A fist force that was similar to the prodigious demolition sword, but many times more terrifying than the prodigious demolition sword struck out, wanting to shatter all matter in its path. Right now, without the god of universal truth's powers to propel the 3 worlds eradication, the first prince's realm was unable to affect the microscopic world. However, despite this, Feng Xingjian did not perform the light pursuit sword, allowing his body to turn into light to dodge the first prince's attack. It was because if he were to dodge, the person behind him would die. Just like in the other 3 battlefields, each of the first prince's punches struck out toward Audrey. It was only Feng Xingjian who was blocking them. Violent fist force gushed out toward Feng Xingjian, and countless sword lights were on the verge of collapsing under his fist force. Can't even withstand a single blow. Bang, 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 bang. Amidst explosive sounds, the sword lights were shattered, and the first prince's fist smashed onto Feng Xingjian's head. The violent fist force brought along a destructive aura, and Feng Xingjian's entire body undulated as countless cracks appeared. The first prince had been waiting for this feeling of having the upper hand and being unable to retaliate against Feng Xingjian. Feng Xingjian. Another punch smashed out, colliding fiercely against Feng Xingjian's chest, creating a depression. If you don't die today. Rumbling sounds rang out, as if a myriad of thunderstorms were ringing out from the fist force, smashing fiercely onto Feng Xingjian's body, once again depleting the power of his martial will in his body. My heart is uneasy. Another punch shattered the sword intent and landed on Feng Xingjian's stomach. Seeing that Feng Xingjian's martial will was being depleted rapidly, the first prince broke into a proud smile. Your existence itself is a mistake. Since this world already has me, it doesn't need you anymore. In the blink of an eye, the sky full of black light had already enveloped Audrey and Feng Xingjian. An unrivaled destructive aura descended from the sky, and the first prince's entire body burned with black flames. It was the martial will that he had transformed in order to cultivate the 3 worlds eradication. Right now, the first prince had changed from his original domineering will and ambition to control everything to a disposition of destroying all living things and shattering the three realms. Just the aftermath of this attack alone was enough to turn the entire Sun City into dust. At the center of the attack, there was only darkness. Even light was completely absorbed by the distortion of space. This was the limit of a microscopic attack that could distort space. It was also the first prince's current pinnacle attack. In the sky above the imperial capital, outside the purple light pillar, the chaos which was still aware of the situation of the four battlefields. It was because her sisters were watching each of the battlefields. True Lord Qingshan was at a disadvantage, but before that happened, the three members of the Krieg royal family would all deal Fang Xingjian with serious injuries. Coupled with the two guardian kings in the formation, even if Fang Xingjian did not die, he would have to recuperate for at least 3 months or even half a year. It would be sufficient for the chaos which to get everything back on track. As for whether true Lord Qingshan, Alexander, the first prince, the fifth prince, and the others were killed by Fang Xingjian, it was none of her business. In fact, if the chaos which really wanted to kill Fang Xingjian, she would only need to contact the Black Mage King and the Red Mage King to replace the two princes. It was a pity that she did not plan on killing Fang Xingjian. Moreover, the two Mage Kings clearly had other plans as well. They had their own plans for the evil god summoning ritual, and it was impossible for them to listen to the Chaos Witch's arrangements. However, just as the situation was going well and everything was developing according to her expectations, the Purple Mage King appeared before her. Claudia, the Chaos Witch Lamia, looked at the Purple Mage King and appeared directly. She asked in a gentle voice, "What are you trying to do?" The Purple Mage King broke into an extremely charming smile, looked at the Chaos Witch, and said, "Lamia, since you want to deal with Fang Xingjian so much, of course I'll have to help you." The Chaos Witch Lamia's countenance was a little grim as she looked at Claudia and said, "Claudia, think through your actions. Are you going to interfere with the world's operations, go back on the God's agreement, and destroy the entire world?" The Purple Mage King Claudia smiled. She looked at the Chaos Witch like she was looking at a clown, and the more she smiled, the happier she became. Finally, the Chaos Witch could not take it anymore and said, "What's so funny? Everything we do concerns the past and future of the entire world. Don't you understand your responsibility?" The Purple Mage King Claudia let out a cold laugh. "The entire world? Stop joking, Lamia. You think too highly of yourself. Compared to the evil god, compared to the god of universal truth, and compared to the countless great existences in the multivariate universe, we're not even a speck of dust. Everything was decided at the beginning of the game. What you're doing is just lying to yourself." She then raised her palm, and there was a little purple light sphere floating in her palm. Anyone who saw the existence of this light sphere, especially this purple light sphere, would feel a numbing feeling. It was a sour, sweet, longing, and warm feeling. Love is the greatest power in the world, the Purple Mage King Claudia said with a sigh. The Purple Mage King Claudia sighed softly and said, "Other than the most ancient gods, all intelligent life forms are unable to break free from their existence. Parents, children, lovers, countries, society, tribes, and even oneself. Everything is formed by love and linked by love." Looking at that purple light sphere, the Chaos Witch's countenance changed drastically. "This is 5 million sets of love." The Purple Mage King laughed crazily. "You lunatic," the Chaos Witch said with a grim countenance. "Stop this quickly. You have no idea what you're doing." Even ordinary people would probably be able to see the panic in her eyes. The Purple Mage King smiled soundlessly and said, "Of course I know. It's for the sake of the person I love." With that, she slapped out a palm toward Lilia. The purple ball of light was still in his palm, and he slapped it toward Lilia. Right now, Lilia appeared to be in a daze. Her eyes were lifeless, and her body was stiff. It was as if she did not know what was going to happen next. Simultaneously, a stream of sword light cut across the sky, almost instantly blocking before Lilia. At the sight of this scene, the Chaos Witch let out an enraged bellow, "No!" Chapter 792. within the imperial capital, which was encompassed by the ritual in a small world that had broken away from the timeline. Battles and killings did not stop for even a moment. A conferred knight was walking on the twisted streets. Suddenly, he stopped in his tracks and revealed a puzzled gaze as he looked at the buildings that had been pieced together. However, before he could react, a black shadow had already descended from the sky. It was the Black Mage King, who had his mouth wide open. Right now, the Black Mage King's face was filled with black aura, and his eyes were filled with a greedy green light. Just like that, the Black Mage King's mouth descended from the sky and instantly swallowed that conferred knight. Before this conferred knight could even react, he was completely digested by the Black Mage King. The Black Mage King patted his tummy and revealed a satisfied smile as he sensed the increasing power in his body. My martial will has increased to 3,500 points. Fang Xingjian's martial will had already surpassed that of ordinary tier 4 or 5 divine level experts. However, it was only at 2,000 points. It was already sufficient for him to overturn rivers and seas and kill tier 4 divine level experts with ease. Right now, the Black Mage King, who had continued to engulf and improve himself, had already increased his martial will to 3,500 points. Even the Black Mage King himself did not know how terrifying his powers would be if he were to unleash them at full power. It was because there was too much food in the ritual. It's been a long time since I've eaten so much. Right now, not only were there a large number of divine-level experts and demigods who had rushed over from within the Empire's borders, but there were also divine-level experts that Shang had left behind in the imperial capital. Such a rich variety of food made the Black Mage King extremely excited, especially the sumptuous meal. At the thought of this, the Black Mage King turned his head and looked toward the center of the imperial capital. His eyes revealed an extremely excited expression. At the next moment, 6 figures descended abruptly, surrounding the Black Mage King. Looking at the 6 people who had suddenly appeared, the Black Mage King smiled. "Everyone, what's the matter?" Black Mage King, a strong man who was completely black and had a bald head, walked out. He looked at the Black Mage King with an unfriendly expression and said, "You 8 guy." The 6 people before him were 6 of the 8 divine-level experts that Shang had left behind in the imperial capital. As for the other 2, Maruto, who was at tier 3 of the divine level, had been captured by Fang Xingjian and then brought to the Great Western region. The other person, who was called Kai, had been eaten up by the Black Mage King. The burly, dark-skinned man who was speaking now was called Crowley. He was from the same era as the church's holy maiden Luoyuo 3,000 years ago. He was one of the strongest people on the continent at that time, and he was one of the 10 divine generals of the Diamond Dynasty. He was also the strongest expert, a tier 3 divine level knight, that Shang had left behind in the Empire this time, around aside from Maruto. However, right now, Crowley, who was one of the 10 divine generals of the Diamond Dynasty 3,000 years ago, was as pleasant as food before the Black Mage King. Cole stared at the Black Mage King and said, "Are you going to make an enemy out of Shang?" The Black Mage King patted his tummy, smiled, and said, "Then I won't stand on ceremony." After eating up these 6 divine-level experts, he would be one step closer to his goal. The silhouettes kept flashing, shuttling back and forth between the spatial rifts. That was the School of Sword Art's Supreme Chief performing his Astral Obscurity Sword. This unparalleled killing technique, which was created from the School of Sword Art's Supreme Manual, the Galaxy Creation Sword Manual, had once been very famous in the hands of the Supreme Chief and was considered to be one of the strongest sword techniques in the Empire. Fang Xingjian had also learned this sword technique in the past. He had even used this sword technique to shuttle through spatial rifts and defeat many powerful enemies. He had then combined the essence of countless sword arts into the foundation of this sword technique, creating the world-shocking infiltrating void sword. Right now, the Supreme Chief had reached tier 2 of the divine level, and the prowess of the Astral Obscurity Sword in his hands was even greater. He shuttled freely between spatial rifts, changing his size, appearing and disappearing at will. He could be as big as a mountain peak or as small as a physical particle. However, he continued to flee incessantly. A hint of panic would occasionally flash in his eyes. It was because he understood very well how terrifying the monster chasing after him was. With a soft kacha sound, a stream of red light flashed in the air, and the supreme chief, Hung Tianxiao, was squeezed out from the spatial rifts. Then he was sent flying out like a rubber ball, smashing through the houses and streets that were over 3,000 meters away, leaving behind a large area of ruins. His entire body was shattered, and streams of light spots dissipated rapidly from his body. With just that single attack, he felt that his martial will and conjured physique were on the verge of breaking down. It was as if his body would completely dissipate at any moment. With just one strike, he killed me. The corners of Hung Tianxiao's lips curled up into a hint of a bitter smile. It was true that these mages were much stronger than knights of the same level. Walking through the ruins, the Red Mage King looked at Hung Tianxiao in the distance and revealed a hint of boredom. He had already lost interest in this prey. However, halfway through, he suddenly stopped and looked at the things under the ruins, leaving behind a curious expression. Under the exposed ruins, a large number of commoners were exposed. Each of them seemed to be dead. They were either lying down, sprawled on the ground, or sitting there. As the houses on the streets were destroyed, these people were thrown out like bugs. However, they still seemed to be dead. They were tossed into the sky, plunged to the ground, buried, discarded, dismembered, or scorched. These commoners, who were either really dead or seemed to be dead, had their heads wrapped up by a purple bug. The Red Mage King squatted down and reached out his hand to grab the bug that was covering the face of a commoner. As he pulled fiercely, the sound of cloth being torn rang out, and countless tentacles were pulled out from the person's head and face. Clearly, not only had these bugs covered the person's head, but they had also inserted their tentacles into the person's head. After the bug was removed, the Red Mage King was unable to sense any brainwaves from the commoner's brain, even though his physical characteristics were that of a living person. The Red Mage King grabbed out of curiosity and tore off the commoner's arm. However, the commoner still did not show any signs of waking up. It was as if he had turned into a vegetable. What the hell is this? Looking at the jellyfish-like purple bug in his hand, the Red Mage King gave it some thought and then bit down on it. Then he spat it out. It tastes too horrible. It's like feces that have been air-dried for 10 years. Shaking his head, the Red Mage King soon lost interest in the bugs and commoners under his feet. He turned his head and continued to walk toward the School of Sword Art Supreme Chief, who was seriously injured. Right now, over 5 million people in the imperial capital were buried under the Red Mage King's feet. Each of their heads was covered by a similar bug, and all of them lay under the ruins as if they had turned into people in a vegetative state. It was as if they had lost their souls. Chapter 793. At the sight of this scene, the chaos which let out an enraged bellow. However, the chaos who is unable to be touched, attacked, or come into contact with or attack others, had no means to stop this scene from happening. Almost at the instant, the Purple Mage King slapped out her palm toward Lilia. Feng Xingjian instantly sensed the danger through his sudden inspiration as they had returned to this universe and timeline from the ritual. Without any hesitation or thinking, Feng Xingjian split up another 10% of his powers from true Lord Qingshan's battlefield. His body turned into a light sword and arrived in the imperial capital at light speed, blocking before Lilia. Looking at the sword light that was coming toward her, the Purple Mage King Claudia revealed an excited smile, unlike the chaos which Lamia's fury. The light sphere in her palm was what she called 5 million sets of love. She had spent a tremendous amount of effort to create it. Making use of the opportunity of setting up the ritual, the Purple Mage King sent all of her powers and the bugs under her to encompass the entire imperial capital. A total of 5 million people in the imperial capital were also buried underground by her. Everyone had their brains parasitized by her bugs, and then she sent out the same message to all the commoners. That was to fall in love with Lilia. Everyone's minds were filled up and covered by Lilia's information. All sorts of Lilia's images, voice, and disposition filled up their minds, and then turned into endless love under the effects of black magic. All the details were filled up by that dreamlike feeling, and everyone's love was distorted by the purple mage king. It could be said that while the ritual was being carried out, she also took the opportunity to make the 5 million people in the imperial capital, regardless of their age, gender, elderly, middle-aged women, middle-aged men, or 5-year-old children, fall in love with Lilia to varying degrees. However, this was just the beginning. Thereafter, she once again borrowed the powers of the bugs and black magic to draw out the wills of all 5 million people. The love of 5 million people was held in her hands. This was her true goal. It could be said that anyone who was hit by these 5 million sets of love would fall hopelessly in love with Lilia if they were to be channeled into their minds. However, this was also a double-edged sword. After suffering the impact of 5 million sets of consciousness, those below the divine level would definitely die. Even those above the divine level might be seriously injured. Therefore, when she slammed these 5 million sets of love toward Lilia, Feng Xingjian sensed danger. He sensed that Lilia would die from this attack, and so he instantly split up 10% of his powers to block in front of Lilia. This was also the Purple Mage King's goal, to channel 5 million sets of love into Feng Xingjian. Of love, therefore, under the Chaos Witch's furious gaze, the Purple Mage King's smile, and Feng Xingjian's astonished gaze, the purple light sphere gushed into Feng Xingjian's brain, entering deep into his consciousness. It was as if oil had been poured into a boiling pot. At this moment, Feng Xingjian felt as if his entire brain was going to explode, and countless pieces of information seemed to be exploding in his brain. With 5 million consciousnesses gushing in, even with Feng Xingjian's current cultivation, he was stunned. Idiot! At the sight of this scene, the Chaos Witch knew that the situation had completely gone out of control. She shook her head, looked at the Purple Mage King with a mocking expression, and said, "Do you think that you've given him feelings? Isn't that the case?" The Purple Mage King Claudia looked at the dazed Feng Xingjian with satisfaction. Looking at the purple light that kept on flashing in his eyes, she broke into a satisfied smile, as if she had seen a perfect piece of art. Feelings? The Chaos Witch King smiled. Nothing has ever been taken away from him. He's just been sealed. Seal? The Purple Mage King frowned and asked puzzledly, "Why is it a seal?" The Chaos Witch King shook her head and slowly dissipated into the air. "You'll never know what kind of demon you've released." At the next moment, she disappeared from the Purple Mage King's sight, leaping toward the north of the land. The entire situation in the Empire has completely gone out of control. Feng Xingjian has been released from his restraints, and there's probably no one in the Empire who can stop him. At the thought of this, Lamia's eyes revealed a grim expression. Now that things have come to this, I can only place all of my powers on the Steel Lion Kingdom and the Church. I hope that nothing goes wrong in the north. After the Chaos Witch King left, the Purple Mage King started to feel puzzled. The Chaos Witch King's earlier words kept on lingering in Claudia's mind. She looked at Feng Xingjian, and her purple martial will kept on scanning him. It was as if she had entered deep into Feng Xingjian's inner world, observing the changes in the information in his mind. Right now, Feng Xingjian's mind was drowned by countless voices. Lilia, 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 Lilia. Countless voices were calling out the same name, and the love of 5 million people was squeezed into Feng Xingjian's mind. However, in reality, they were unable to resonate with him. The intense love did not distort Feng Xingjian's consciousness and grant him feelings. Instead, it called out something deep in Feng Xingjian's heart that he had thought did not exist. Kacha! There seemed to be a shattering sound ringing out in his mind. Lilia! I love Lilia. She's so cute. She's so pure. Countless voices were shouting out in Feng Xingjian's mind. Feng Xingjian was like a bystander, watching everything and even frowning slightly. Kacha kacha. The shattering sound in his mind grew increasingly louder. There seemed to be something exploding in the depths of his heart. Where is Lilia? We must find her. Where are we? Where's this place? Fervent emotions were like strong alcohol, erupting in an instant. However, after the eruption, it brought about countless uncertainties and questions. Looking at these, Feng Xingjian felt even more perplexed, and more cracks flashed in his heart. Kacha, kacha, kacha. At the next moment, something seemed to shatter abruptly. In the sky above the imperial capital, Feng Xingjian opened his eyes and looked at the world before him. Everything seemed to be the same, but he knew that everything was different. Looking at the abnormality in Feng Xingjian's heart, countless pieces of information flashed in the Purple Mage King's mind. In this world, there are indeed people who can ignore, or rather, not be affected by, a part of their emotions. They are cold-blooded, emotionless, selfish, and absolutely rational. Or perhaps it can be said that they are born to be heartless. Could it be that this Feng Xingjian is such a person? The Purple Mage King's marshal kept scanning through Feng Xingjian's heart, unwilling to let go of any tiny bit of justification in his heart. Suddenly, her countenance changed, and with a flash, she retreated at light speed. 5 million sets of love didn't grant and distort his emotions. Instead, it activated something in his body. To think that it's like this, it's not a deprivation, but a seal. Since that's the case, I'll need to observe him carefully before making a decision. Chapter 794. Seeing that the Purple Mage King was retreating, Feng Xingjian did not stop her. He merely turned around and slashed out. A stream of purple light flashed, as if he had slashed something off from Lilia's body. With this slash from Feng Xingjian, Lilia's eyes regained clarity in that instant, and she put out her hand. Master! However, she realized that her body was descending uncontrollably. She could only watch as Feng Xingjian moved further and further away from her. Feng Xingjian did not look at her. When he confirmed that Lilia would land outside the imperial capital and had left safely, he could no longer hold it in. When the feelings he had lost for 3 years had returned to his body, when he learned about the current situation of the battle, the first feeling he felt was anger, indignation, and boundless anger burning in his heart. At this moment, he had a strong urge to kill. It was not because someone had killed his subordinates that he wanted to take revenge. It was because he wanted to kill after understanding this logic. Rather, at this moment, there was only one thought in his heart: killing. With a flash of light, this 10% of power returned to the Great Western region, once again fending off true Lord Qingshan's attack. In the Northern Ice region, the Fifth Prince's eyes were filled with excitement as he watched Feng Xingjian, who was at a disadvantage and had no way to retaliate. How long had he waited? How much price had he paid? How many times had he failed? This time around, he was finally able to crush Feng Xingjian, who was a thorn in his side, completely as if he was crushing an ant. However, at the next moment, the Fifth Prince discovered that Feng Xingjian had suddenly disappeared. At the same time that Feng Xingjian disappeared, a message was transmitted into the Fifth Prince's mind by Feng Xingjian. 5 seconds. Before I leave, you have a total of 5 seconds to think about your last words. In that instant, Feng Xingjian disappeared completely, and the Fifth Prince's fist force struck out toward Jacob, who was behind Feng Xingjian. Jacob's countenance changed, and he attacked with the Holy Light clan's Myria Holy Light, clashing fiercely against the Fifth Prince's 3 worlds eradication. However, before the 3 worlds eradication, the Holy Light clan's ultimate technique was like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. The Fifth Prince's punch completely shattered Jacob's martial will, almost instantly turning it into dust. Countless specks of light shattered in midair. They were like fireflies trying to gather together with great difficulty. However, after crushing Jacob's martial will with a single punch and almost causing him to be on the brink of death, the pride on the Fifth Prince's face turned into panic. Feng Xingjian, come out. If you don't come out, I'll beat him to death. Recalling Feng Xingzhan's earlier words, the panic on the fifth prince's face grew increasingly intense. He punched out once again, and Feng Xingzhan's distorted martial will in midair was once again shattered. Feng Xingzhan completely dissipated into nothingness. The top expert among the 7 great clans, the head of the Holy Light clan, and Jacob, who had been subdued by Feng Xingzhan in the past, had finally died in the hands of the fifth prince. However, the fifth prince was not satisfied at all. His face was filled with panic, and in the blink of an eye, he turned into a long stream of light, disappearing into the horizon. Right now, there was only one sentence in his heart. Flee. Flee as far as you can. It was because he understood clearly that when Feng Xingzhan started to go against the rules he had set himself, when he started to not care about the lives of his subordinates or anyone else, such a Feng Xingzhan would be very terrifying. The first prince looked at the shattered Feng Xingzhan and finally stopped his attacks, laughing out loud. In his opinion, the current Feng Xingzhan was no longer able to put up any resistance before him. He looked at Feng Xingzhan and said, Feng Xingzhan, I've always admired your talent. However, you shouldn't have made an enemy out of the entire Krieg royal family. This is the greatest mistake you've made in your life. Our clan has established the empire for 200 years. It's not something that you can covet. The more the first prince spoke, the more exhilarated he felt. How long had he been dreaming of Feng Xingzhan groveling before him and being beaten up by him until he could not even withstand a single blow? Right now, this dream had finally come true. As expected, I'm the only one who is fated to be the one. Only I can lead the entire empire. I'm the most outstanding successor to the Krieg royal family. However, at the next moment, a stream of sword light cut across the sky, interrupting the first prince's thoughts. Feng Xingzhan, who had left the fifth prince, came before the first prince. The 2 gushes of 5% of his powers merged into one, and his battle prowess instantly increased by several times. After all, even though his powers had increased by 2 times, his battle prowess was not as simple as increasing by 2 times. It was like how one person could punch out 50 kilograms while the other could punch out 100 kilograms. The difference in their battle prowess was more than just 2 times. The first prince looked in the direction where the sword light had come from, and his countenance changed. He stopped his attacks and thought, what's going on? Did the others fail? However, he was not sure how much battle prowess Feng Xingzhan had. Feng Xingzhan merely looked at the first prince. Countless emotions and memories suddenly flowed out from his heart, and the entire world seemed to have become livelier. Among them, the most intense was the rage in his heart. In the past, I didn't have any emotions. Therefore, I only acted according to the way I acted as a human. Sensing the fury in his chest, Feng Xingzhan had never felt as alive as he was today. At this moment, he suddenly realized that he did not need a reason or a motive. He could do anything and kill anyone. It was as if there was nothing in the entire world that could stop him from making a decision. Feng Xingzhan looked at the first prince and asked, "Aren't you going to escape?" The first prince's face was distorted, and he gritted his teeth. In his fury, he continued to punch out. The 3-world eradication turned into a stream of black light and charged out toward Feng Xingzhan. Under the first prince's propulsion, even without the god of universal truth's reinforcement, this great martial technique had already reached an extreme in terms of destructive prowess. Unless one entered deep into the microscopic world, there were no longer any attacks that could remain intact under this attack. However, with a flash of sword light, the first prince's entire arm was slashed off. Ah! A crazed, furious bellow rang out from the first prince's martial will, and he punched out again. Black light burst out, encompassing both Feng Xingzhan and Audrey. However, after the black light dissipated, only the first prince's other arm was slashed off. It turned into light fragments and dissipated into the air. Why? Looking at the undefeatable Feng Xingzhan, the first prince finally revealed an expression of despair and regret. It was only when Fong Xingjian could truly display his abilities that the first prince realized that he was already so weak that he could not even withstand a single blow. Unknowingly, the distance between the first prince and Fong Xingjian was like the distance between the clouds and the mud. Has the distance between us already reached such an extent? At the thought of this, the first prince suddenly felt extremely regretful. He regretted that he had not killed Fong Xingjian back then. He regretted that he had not gone all out to win Fong Xingjian over. Performing his final despairing attack, the first prince leaped up abruptly and headbutted fiercely toward Fong Xingjian. Boom! Their heads collided, but the first prince's head instantly turned into dust. His entire body gradually cracked, turning into a myriad of light spots that slowly dissipated in midair. Looking at the myriad of light fragments, Fong Xingjian disappeared once again. He turned into a stream of sword light, leaving behind a long light belt in the sky. He instantly traversed a distance of several thousand kilometers and arrived in Xingwu region. Chapter 795. In the full moon shrine in the Xingwu continent, Fong Xingjian, who had 20% of his powers, was wrapped up by Alexander. Alexander attacked Fong Xingjian like he was hitting a sandbag. Overturned hell, mortal world reversal. Alexander performed many unrivaled techniques from the ancient path of hell, causing Fong Xingjian, who was wrapped up in Adam's shroud, to not make a single sound. It was as if he was dead. At the side, the astral ancestor, blue sacred moonlight, and Lan Yu all attacked Alexander. However, the strongest amongst them, the astral ancestor, was only at tier 2 of the divine level. How could he possibly be a match for Alexander? Various illusions of stars and moons shot out one after another, flattening the surrounding area within a radius of 1,000 meters. However, when the attacks from the 3 of them landed on Alexander's body, they were like pebbles sinking into the ocean. There was no change at all. The astral ancestor's countenance was extremely grim. Their attacks were completely useless against Alexander, and Fong Xingjian was completely suppressed by Alexander. There was no hope for him to retaliate at all. At this moment, Alexander's unrivaled ferocious prowess, which had dominated the empire for several decades, once again gushed into the trio's hearts. The blue sacred moonlight was the first to stop. Her blue eyes were filled with terror. This won't do. Our attacks are completely ineffective. In her heart, she could not help but feel hesitant. Could it be that even Fong Xingjian isn't a match for him this time around? The astral ancestor also stopped and looked at Alexander, who was in the distance. The strange light in his eyes flickered. This is bad. This time around, Alexander has used Adam's shroud. Adam's shroud? Hearing this name, the blue sacred moonlight jumped in fright. This is the ancient path of hell's greatest treasure. Legend has it that unless the empire's survival is at stake, it mustn't be used lightly. Adam's shroud was a great divine equipment. It was an existence that was even more famous than Alexander's. 200 years ago, when the empire had been unified, it had been the nightmare of countless factions and influences. Even the current blue sacred moonlight and the astral ancestor had grown up listening to legendary stories about it. This was especially so 20 years ago when the Serene shrine, which was controlled by the gray robe mages, had fought against the various influences in the empire. It was also during that time that Alexander had brought out this ancient path of hell's ultimate treasure. That year, everyone once again experienced the horror from 200 years ago. Adam's shroud once again became a nightmare that no one wanted to face. However, Lan Yu had never experienced that era. When she heard the conversation between the two of them, she immediately asked, "Is it that powerful? What was the use of Adam's shroud?" Alexander was clearly on par with Xingjian previously. How is it that he is able to suppress Xingjian completely this time around? Whether they were willing or not, the 3 of them had to admit that Alexander had completely suppressed Fong Xingjian. In fact, it was even possible for him to completely suppress Fong Xingjian. The blue sacred moonlight said coldly, "An attack will hit, and an attack will be completed. All of Adam's Shroud's attacks don't require time." This means that when faced with this divine equipment, the only thing you can do is to clash head-on. Moreover, you'll have to use your entire body to clash head-on with the opponent's strongest point. The astral ancestor's countenance was also extremely grim. The current situation shows that Xinjiang is still not a match for Alexander in a head-on clash. Thinking of this, he sighed. After all, Alexander has a strong foundation and countless legacies. He's also a Tier 5 divine level expert. It's only natural that he's stronger than Xinjiang in terms of strength. Moreover, now that Adam's Shroud has already sealed Xinjiang, it'll be a battle of pure strength. Xinjiang is at a great disadvantage. Hearing the astral ancestor's explanation, the worry on Lan Yu's face grew even stronger. Just then, Alexander performed another mortal world reversal at the microscopic level. Countless microscopic particles spun in the opposite direction between his palms, and an aura of destruction and creation, as well as an unrivaled prowess, was emitted. The three of them scanned it with their martial wills, only to discover that even when their martial wills entered it, they were instantly wiped out. They were unable to understand the changes in that palm attack. They had never heard of or seen such means before. As if sensing the trio's astonishment, Alexander spoke to them for the first time since the start of the battle. Divine-level martial prowess, other than the ability to overturn rivers and seas at the start, distort space at the end, and then control the microscopic space. As he said this, the terrifying aura in his palms continued to expand. Countless light spots and heat energy undulated, as if the entire world was about to explode between his palms. This mortal world reversal at the microscopic level was Alexander's full power. He had a feeling that under this attack, Fang Xinjiang would definitely die. This was a realm that his father and grandfather had never come into contact with before. This was the true profoundness of the mortal world reversal. Not only did it distort space, but it also distorted the microscopic particles in space, changing the world's foundation. Right now, the prowess of this attack of Alexander's was already close to that of true Lord Qingshan's duality minute formation's chaotic air currents. It was just that the quantity was far inferior. There had never been a moment when Alexander had felt so powerful. He even had an urge to stop immediately and give Fang Xinjiang time to recover. He would then defeat Fang Xinjiang in his prime fair and square, letting Fang Xinjiang know that he, Alexander, was definitely not any weaker than Fang Xinjiang. However, it was just an impulse. Thankfully, there were still 3 spectators, so he would not be unable to vent the pride in his heart. The foundation of everything in the world comes from the microscopic world. The true profoundness of this mortal world reversal is to shake the microscopic world, and from there, shake the entire human world. It's a pity that even though I've comprehended the supreme profoundness of this move, Fang Xinjiang, you're going to die. There will be one less opponent in the world who can take on this move of mine. At the next moment, the terrifying aura in Alexander's palms came crashing down, striking Adam's Shroud. It was transmitted to Fang Xinjiang's body through Adam's Shroud. The entire Adam's Shroud started to tremble like never before, as if it had reached some kind of limit that it could bear. What was even more terrifying was that within several tens of meters around Alexander, bits of terrifying aura gushed out, wiping out the land within a range of several tens of meters completely. It was not an explosion or shattering. Instead, it had completely disappeared. Seeing the pieces of land suddenly disappear, turning into invisible energy and dissipating into the world, the 3 people present were all astonished. The tremors that were encompassed by Adam's Shroud became increasingly slower, as if everything inside was gradually turning into nothingness. Alexander said calmly, "Although the 3 of you submitted to Fang Xinjiang in the past, the Empire is in need of manpower now. From today onward, you'll be part of the Knight Association. If you strive to redeem yourself with meritorious deeds, you'll be spared from the death penalty." Looking at the changes to Adam's Shroud, Lan Yu shouted in her consciousness, quickly used the formation. However, despite hearing her shout, the blue sacred moonlight did not say anything. Instead, her expression was gloomy, making it hard to tell what she was thinking. Lan Yu looked at the blue sacred moonlight in disbelief and shouted, "Grandmaster!" The blue sacred moonlight sent a voice transmission through her martial will. "Lan Yu, if Alexander wins, what will happen to our full moon shrine?" Chapter 796. Therefore, all the more we mustn't let him win. Lan Yu said furiously, "Grandmaster, hurry up and activate our sacred shrines formation. We must at least slow it down and buy time for Xinjiang. That way, we'll still have a chance." "But he's already going to lose," the blue sacred moonlight said with a sigh. "It's true that Fang Xinjiang is an outstanding talent of his generation, but right now, Alexander's skills are clearly a notch higher. Lan Yu, I know that you're interested in Fang Xinjiang, but at a time like this, we should consider the bigger picture. The 3,600 people in the full moon shrine, as well as several hundred years of legacies, are all on our shoulders. They mustn't end in my hands. If we were to make another move now, you should know the outcome." Hearing this, Lan Yu wanted to rebut, but was unable to say a word. In a world like Miracle World, the difference in strength between individuals had reached an overwhelming level. In order to survive, the influences and experts here had long since learned to respect the will of the strong and follow in the footsteps of the stronger ones. Therefore, Lan Yu knew that there was no problem with the blue sacred moonlight lowering her head to Alexander. It was just like how they had lowered their heads to Fang Xinjiang back then. It was just that they had changed from one expert to another. Since Alexander had already spoken up to warn them, the outcome if they were to make another move was self-evident. However, at the thought of this, Lan Yu's eyes still revealed a hint of reluctance. The blue sacred moonlight patted Lan Yu's shoulder, as if consoling her. On the battlefield, Alexander did not care about what the three of them were thinking. To him, it would be fine if the three of them knew how to adapt to the circumstances. But if they did not, then they would be useless, and there was no need for him to take them in. Just when everyone thought that the outcome of the battle had been decided, a beam of sword light flashed across the sky, bringing with it a long path of light as it cut across the sky. Finally, it shot directly toward Adam's shroud, entering it, and eventually dissipating. At the sight of this scene, Alexander's pupils contracted slightly. At this moment, an extremely bad premonition suddenly rose in his heart. It was a sense of danger brought about by the sudden inspiration. 10% of Fang Xinjiang's powers had rushed to the Xingwu region and instantly penetrated through Adam's shroud with his light pursuit sword technique, merging with 20% of his powers. His strength increased rapidly, and his combat prowess continued to rise. The current Fang Xinjiang that Alexander was facing was only 50% stronger than before. However, his combat prowess had increased by more than a few times. At the next moment, amidst Alexander's astonishment and the blue sacred moonlights, Lan Yu's, and the astral ancestors' disbelieving gazes, a stream of sword light darted out from Adam's shroud. Then a stream of cross-shaped sword light flashed, and a huge wound was torn out from Adam's shroud. Fang Xinjiang held the light sword in his hand and walked out in void space. His conjured physique was still covered in cracks, but it did not affect his current aura in the slightest. The shattered Adam's shroud and the light sword condensed from his martial will added 30% more power to him. The sword will soar into the sky and rushed toward Alexander. "Alexander, if you survive a sword attack from me today, I'll spare your entire Krieg royal family." Sensing the information contained in the will, Alexander's heart was filled with rage. He had just comprehended the supreme realm of the ancient path of hell. So how could he be scared off by Fang Xinjiang? He even felt exhilarated from being able to defeat Fang Xinjiang head-on. Arrogant lad. The shattered Adam's shroud and the surroundings instantly trembled and then wrapped up Fang Xinjiang once again. Alexander raised his palms, and the martial will throughout his body continued to shatter. The blue sacred moonlight said in astonishment in her consciousness. Who's entering hell? This is the ancient path of hell's method of burning the will and stimulating the power. Alessandra is going all out. Lanyu's brows were also furrowed tightly, and hints of worry flashed in her eyes. The astral ancestor also kept a close eye on the battlefield. It was because the outcome of this battle would directly affect their future. Would Alessandra win in the end? Or would Feng Xingjian be more skilled? The strength of both sides had already surpassed their understanding, causing them to be confused. Endless terrifying auras extended out from Alessandra's palms, and his martial will was burning. The prowess of the mortal world reversal that erupted from this attack far surpassed ordinary ones. The mortal world reversal turned into a terrifying air current, and wherever it passed by, everything in the world would be annihilated. It struck Adam's shroud, and at the instant the Adam's shroud transmitted this destructive force, countless cracks appeared on it. Even the entire space started to tremble intensely, showing signs of instability. The supreme profoundness of the mortal world reversal was to shake the microscopic world and then affect the macroscopic world, reversing the foundations of the entire world. Alessandra's attack once again surpassed his previous pinnacle, reaching a brand new realm. It even started to show signs of shaking and changing the microscopic world. This was a power that surpassed the ability to unleash one's powers into the microscopic world. It was a power that only those at Tier 6 of the divine level and above could comprehend. At this moment, a hint of comprehension flashed in Alessandra's heart. If I were to strive for Tier 6 of the divine level now, I'd probably have 70% confidence. However, at the next moment, an intense sense of danger gushed out in his heart. Amidst Adam's shroud, Feng Xingjian tapped out with a finger, and powerful heavenly thunders and terrestrial magnetism forces extended out from his finger. The all-conquering sword intent was activated at full power, piercing out in Alessandra's direction. Take this. Alessandra's mortal world reversal started to affect the powers of the microscopic world. However, Feng Xingjian had long since comprehended a hint of the nature of electromagnetic forces, strong force, and weak force. Although he was unable to directly control the microscopic world and could only use his own powers to affect the microscopic world, the two of them were incomparable in terms of their comprehension of the microscopic world. At this moment, a stream of sword light seemed to slash through everything before Alessandra. Adam's shroud was slashed apart once again, and the terrifying aura condensed by the mortal world reversal was slashed apart. The sword light slashed through Alessandra's head and darted into the depths of his consciousness. Along the way, countless memories were stirred up, and countless martial wills shattered. In the end, the sword light shot out from the back of Alessandra's head, shooting out diagonally toward the sky like a meteor. It soared up into the sky and even pierced through the atmospheric layer, landing in the 9-tiered heavens, and then dissipated without a trace. At this second, countless people on the land could see a stream of white light soar into the sky. They looked at the light that cut through the sky above the land and revealed astonished expressions. After this sword attack, Alessandra looked at this scene in a daze before Feng Xingjian. His body started to shatter and split up incessantly, turning into countless light spots and dissipating. However, he did not care about these. Instead, he looked at Feng Xingjian and sighed. Is this your full-powered sword attack at your peak? Am I the last opponent you have to rush over? Under this sword attack, his conjured physique had completely collapsed. Alessandra knew that he was doomed with this conjured physique. At this moment, he only wanted to know how much power Feng Xingjian had used and how much of a difference there was between them. Throwing a glance at Alessandra, Feng Xingjian said calmly, 30% of my power. Hearing Feng Xingjian's reply, Alessandra let out a bitter laugh, and his conjured physique dissipated completely, leaving behind only a sigh on the spot. There's such a big difference. At the next moment, sword light cut across the sky, and Feng Xingjian left, leaving behind Lanyu, the blue sacred moonlight, and the astral ancestor, who were all dumbfounded. Chapter 797. Lan Yu's eyes were filled with admiration as she watched Feng Xingjian disappear, killing Alexander with a single sword strike. How terrifying was this? How powerful was this? How shocking was this? How invincible was this? It was not just Lan Yu. The minds of the blue sacred moonlight and the astral ancestor were also filled with Feng Xingjian's earlier sword attack. That sword attack, which had pierced through the sky and slashed through the atmosphere, was far too astonishing. Just by observing from the side, they had the misconception that their wills had been pierced. It was as if there was nothing in the entire world that could fend off that sword attack. The three of them looked in the direction in which Feng Xingjian had disappeared, remaining silent. It was as if they were still immersed in the astonishment brought about by Feng Xingjian's sword attack. Feng Xingjian was already rushing in the direction of the great western region. From the moment he dealt with the first prince to the moment he killed Alexander, he had only spent 5 seconds. After all, both of them were divine-level experts. Even if they were to communicate, it would only take an instant for them to cross 1,000 lis. Within these 5 seconds, Feng Xingjian had scared off the fifth prince, defeated the first prince, and killed Alexander. He had fought across 1,000 lis with a single sword attack, turning the entire situation around. However, Alexander had really died, while the first prince and the fifth prince had left behind their clones. However, after sensing the locations of their clones with his sudden inspiration, Feng Xingjian broke into a cold smile. Is there any use in leaving behind clones? Both the first prince and the fifth prince had split up about 10% of their powers to ensure their survival. However, in comparison, Alexander not leaving behind any clones was the wisest choice. On one hand, it was to ensure that he would be able to go all out in battle. On the other hand, it also showed his confidence in himself. Only when he was determined to win would he not leave behind any clones and go all out. The fact that the first prince and the fifth prince had left behind 10% of their powers was a sign of their lack of confidence in themselves. It was because they were not like Feng Xingjian, who had left behind clones in order to obtain complete victory. Instead, they had left behind clones in order to escape. Moreover, Feng Xingjian had attained Tier 4 of the divine level and possessed the sudden inspiration ability. As long as his clone was still in this world, Feng Xingjian would definitely be able to find it. However, right now, Feng Xingjian was not in a hurry to look for them. Right now, neither the first prince nor the fifth prince were of any concern to him. Right now, he had to settle the battle in the great western region. After spending 2 seconds to deal with true Lord Qingshan, it was more than enough for Feng Xingjian to return and kill the two princes. Over at the great western region, true Lord Qingshan had been extremely exasperated. It was because he realized that his duality minute formation was not a match for Feng Xingjian's sword formation. However, he was, after all, an expert who had been famous for a long time in the past. His panic only lasted for a moment before he regained his senses. Feng Xingjian, do you really think you've won? True Lord Qingshan broke into a cold smile, and a stream of martial will swept out in all directions. Luoluo, Alba, the two of you can come out as well. With true Lord Qingshan's orders, Shang's two divine-level experts finally appeared. Two gushes of martial will, one white and one green, soared into the sky. The clouds in the sky seethed, and under the influence of the two people's astonishing powers, it was as if the entire great western city was welcoming a series of grade 10 typhoons. There were even a few small buildings that were uprooted by the martial will, flying into the sky and eventually turning into dust. These two people were Grand Duke Alba and Saint Luoluo. Right now, Grand Duke Alba was dressed in a black tuxedo, standing in midair like an aristocratic gentleman. This Jade Dynasty's top scholar from 5,000 years ago clearly possessed the strength of a Tier 4 divine-level expert. His aura was overwhelming, and he was like a god or a demon. On the other side was Saint Luoluo, who was completely covered in a white veil, and her face was shrouded in fog. This Saint Luoluo was the saint of the Holy See of Truth from 3,000 years ago. The so-called saint was chosen from countless women by the Holy See of Truth. They had to go through many strict checks. Not only did they have to have a pure faith and bloodline, but they also had to have great talent and be intelligent. After they were chosen to be the saint, they would go through 10 to 20 years of nurturing before eventually becoming the Pope's personal maids. Although they were known as personal maids, no one would look down on them. It was because they were the Pope's personal maids, and many of the Pope's orders were carried out by them personally. Their authority was even greater than that of the guardian kings. Right now, Saint Luoluo had clearly recovered her cultivation to that of a Tier 4 divine level expert. However, it was a pity that she was unable to bring back the divine arts that the God of universal truth had bestowed upon her in her previous life. Despite this, with the countless secret martial arts that she had grasped from the Holy See of Truth, she was still able to look down on 99% of the experts in the world. Seeing the two of them appear, the countenances of everyone in the Great Western Region Regional Academy changed. Regardless of whether it was Tyrant, the Fourth Prince, or Philip, all of their eyes were filled with worry. They had been considering whether they should lend a hand when Feng Xingjian was being suppressed by true Lord Qingshan. After all, the battle prowess displayed by the two of them was far too terrifying, and their participation might end up becoming a burden for Feng Xingjian. Seeing that Feng Xingjian had turned the situation around, everyone felt at ease. However, they had not expected that true Lord Qingshan would bring two great experts with him. True Lord Qingshan looked at Feng Xingjian, who did not seem to care, and his will seethed as he continued to smile coldly. Feng Xingjian, don't think that you can look down on ordinary divine-level experts just because you have this sword formation. Do you think that since I brought them here, I haven't made any preparations? Attack! At the next moment, a myriad of chaotic air currents gushed out from Saint Luoluo and Grand Duke Alba. In that instant, the three duality minute formations in the sky shone, and the number of chaotic air currents increased at a terrifying rate. True Lord Qingshan had imparted his great arts to Saint Luoluo and Grand Duke Alba. The duo's duality minute formation appeared to be very crude, and the prowess of the duality minute formation that they had activated was not even comparable to that of true Lord Qingshan's duality minute formation. However, the duo's sudden attacks were sufficient to break the previous situation. The three duality minute formations shone with each other, and their prowess increased by several times. Chaotic air currents came gushing out in all directions, as if wanting to cover up the entire sky of the Great Western Region. However, most of the power was pressed onto Feng Xingjian. Loud kacha-kacha sounds rang out from Feng Xingjian's sword shadows. It was as if Mount Tai had collapsed and Mount Everest had been broken. True Lord Qingshan laughed maniacally and said, "Feel despair, Feng Xingjian." Seeing the sword shadows that Feng Xingjian had condensed shattering and the chaotic air currents pressing down like a waterfall, the countenances of everyone in the Great Western Region changed. "Run! We can't hold them off anymore. Save us!" In an instant, everyone in the academy broke down. Countless knights and conferred knights fled in all directions, attempting to escape from the danger of the sky collapsing. The countenances of Prince Philip and the others also changed drastically, revealing expressions of despair as they looked at the impasse in the sky. It was because they knew that once Feng Xingjian failed, they would not be able to escape from the other party's attacks. "Let's make our move," Tyron said with a grim countenance. "If we attack together, we might have a chance. Moreover, we can't let Xingjian do everything." Prince Philip nodded. Although their powers were far from being comparable to the duality minute formation, it was impossible for them to sit still and wait for death at a moment of life and death like this. "The three of us will join forces and attack toward one point. Whether we live or die will depend on this." The fourth prince's expression was also solemn, and streams of sword shadows rose up slowly behind him. Chapter 798. Three streams of light soared into the sky, shooting out towards St. Luoluo at the same time. In the scan of Tyrant and the other two's martial wills, St. Luoluo was clearly the weakest amongst the three of them. After all, after St. Luoluo had reincarnated, she was no longer able to use divine arts. On the other hand, Grand Duke Alba was still able to perform most of the martial arts he had when he was still alive. His abilities were not much weaker than when he had been alive. Despite this, the two of them had grasped a portion of the profoundness of the duality minute formation, and their battle prowess had improved tremendously. I'll go first. Amidst the sudden eruption of gray light, Tyrant's entire body suddenly swelled up. It was not the expansion of his martial will, but his actual body. Tyrant's conjured physique was expanding rapidly. Countless flesh and blood seethed inside and outside his body, and countless mouths opened up on his expanding body. These mouths crazily engulfed all the energy in the surroundings, be it air, light, heat, electromagnetic waves, radiation, or anything else. They engulfed them and then continued to multiply. In the blink of an eye, Tyrant had turned into a giant with a height of over 10,000 meters. The power waves on his body were like the sea and the abyss, and it was as if every inch of his skin and every cell was unleashing a reaction that could be compared to a nuclear explosion. 1 month ago, Fang Xingjian had given Tyrant Bu's flesh, which was summoned by the World Annihilation Heavenly Lord. During this 1 month, not only had Tyrant integrated Bu's flesh into his body, but he had also made use of this to achieve continuous breakthroughs, reaching Tier 3 of the divine level. Right now, when he unleashed his full power, he immediately displayed an overwhelming aura. This was especially when he sensed that the engulfment and annihilation intents in Bu's flesh were similar to the concept he had comprehended from the great evil god. This allowed him to achieve a breakthrough in his martial arts. Instantly turning into a 10,000-meter-tall giant, Tyrant punched out, and a massive gray phantom image flashed behind him. It was an extremely large monster land that lay across the universe's void space. It seemed to expand along with the expansion of the entire universe. The entire land seemed to be a living being, like a huge beast that was supporting the entire universe's life. As he punched out, all the mouths on Tyrant's body let out blood-curdling screams. He roared crazily, and his entire body was like a colossal beast capable of destroying the world as he charged toward the St. Luoluo in the sky. On the other side, the fourth prince also made his move. The 7 great sword techniques that had been passed down in the Jade Dynasty were unleashed concurrently. These 7 sword techniques were the general principles of the Jade Dynasty's founder, the mystic Abyss Heavenly Emperor. It contained the supreme secret of the Jade Dynasty's swordsmanship. However, that was not all. As the fourth prince made his move, waves of demonic power burst out from his body. Also 1 month ago, Fang Xingjian had given the Adam's blood that he had taken from the first prince to the fourth prince. After that, the fourth prince used Adam's blood to perform the blood transfusion art on himself, completely cleansing his body and giving it a new lease on life. He merged his will and his physical body into one. Although his cultivation had only risen to Tier 2 of the divine level, he possessed the conjured physique of a Tier 3 divine level expert in advance. Right now, he was unleashing his full power, and the blood throughout his body seethed. A figure that was completely black, as if the entire night sky was draped over his body, appeared behind him. 7 streams of sword shadows flashed up and down in the night sky, seething to and fro. This was the fourth prince's self-created Hell's 7 swords, a martial technique that he had combined Adam's blood, the Jade Dynasty's 7 great sword techniques, and the power of the 9th level of the mystical prince. Pain, bitterness, hunger, crying, misery, evil, death. The 7 swords struck out at the same time, containing 7 types of emotions. They attacked the other party's inner heart, shaking up the other party's will, confusing the other party's emotions, and even causing the effect of the other party's will collapsing. This was another unrivaled sword technique that could be passed down through the generations. With one move of 7 swords, The fourth prince's powers were mixed in with Tyron's attacks and shot out toward the St. Luluo. On Prince Philip's side, he had turned into a bright sun, and the universal truth longsword behind him had achieved a new breakthrough. With the help of the 9th level of the mystical prince, this believer of the holy sea of truth had improved further. Not only had his cultivation reached tier 3 of the divine level, but his universal truth longsword had also improved further. With a single thrust, he could split up yin and yang, sealing up all physical particles within a range of several thousand meters and breaking down any physical structure. Right now, he had turned into a bright sun, encompassing towards St. Luluo. It was as if he wanted to use the universal truth longsword to completely seal and disintegrate St. Luluo. The 3 divine level experts made their moves instantly. In almost 1,000th of a second, it was already a world-shaking and astonishing night. However, at the sight of the 3 of them, St. Luluo smiled coldly in her heart. Do you think that I'm a pushover? It's a pity that you guys have no idea what kind of power I've grasped. She waved her hand, and vigorous chaotic air currents gushed out, bringing along an aura that could cause the heavens to collapse and the earth to sink. There was no need for any technique or technique. She used the most violent and barbaric method to charge out toward the 3 of them. It was like a seething landslide, wanting to drown everything. Rumble. The chaotic air currents collided against Tyron's 10,000-meter-tall body like a tsunami. They instantly drowned Tyron, and his physical body was being destroyed and exploded at a rapid speed. To think that a mere gray-robed person dares to fight against me. St. Luluo let out a cold laugh, and the chaotic air currents passed by Tyron's body and struck the bright sun that Prince Philip had turned into. You dare to perform the universal truth sword technique before me? Today, I'll let you see what the real universal truth sword technique is. The chaotic air currents gushed forth, instantly shattering the myriad of sword light in the sky. Then with a gush of the air currents, they turned into a long sword with chaotic colors that encompassed Prince Philip. Each stream of air currents performed the universal truth longsword sword technique, breaking down and sealing Prince Philip's conjured physique bit by bit. St. Luluo's universal truth longsword was at a realm above that of Prince Philip's. Moreover, as she had used the powers of the duality minute formation to propel her sword technique, its prowess was even more astonishing. Grand Duke Alba also made a move. This lad is performing our Jade Dynasty's sword technique. Leave it to me. After saying that, he tapped out with a finger. It was the sword form of the 6 heaven-soaring swords. The sword pierced through the sky, clashing against the 4th prince's 7 sword shadows with the momentum of a comet piercing through the sun. In that instant, the sword light and sword shadows were all shattered. The 4th prince only felt a heart-piercing pain from his will, and his martial will showed signs of leaving his body. You've only learned the surface of the Jade Dynasty's sword technique, and yet you're thinking of creating your own sword technique? You're really ignorant and fearless. In the blink of an eye, the attacks of the 3 divine level experts from the Great Western region were broken down one by one. Even their own lives were in danger. Under the pressure of the chaotic air currents from the duality minute formation, the sword shadows that Feng Xingjian had condensed kept on shattering. The chaotic air currents brought about by the formation kept on pressing down, and they were now only over 300 meters away from the ground. The pressure, which was as if the sky was collapsing, stimulated everyone in the academy and the great western city crazily. Many tall buildings started to collapse, and the strong gales brought about by the air currents caused many city walls to collapse. Large trees were uprooted from the ground. The endless chaotic air currents seemed to want to encompass the entire sky. One could not see the end of the chaotic air currents. It was as if the entire sky had collapsed, and there was nowhere for one to escape to. Chapter 799. Everyone on the ground looked at the scene in the sky with despair in their eyes. Some people fled frantically, some fell to the ground, and most of them just raised their heads and looked toward the sky with lifeless eyes. It's useless. There's no way to escape. Even Xinjiang isn't a match for him. He's too strong. He has such power that makes one feel despair. Damn it, I don't wish to die yet. Xinjiang, surrender. That's right, surrender. Seeing that he had gained the upper hand, true Lord Qingshan also felt that victory was within his grasp. Looking at Fang Xinjiang, who was under the sword shadows, he shouted out in his consciousness, Fang Xinjiang, are you still going to fight to the death? It's impossible for you to win. If you continue to resist, you and all of your subordinates will eventually be crushed into dust by me. Are you still going to be stubborn? Under the sword shadows, Fang Xinjiang merely looked at true Lord Qingshan coldly. Suddenly, his gaze turned toward the horizon. It's finally settled. In the short period of time when the great western region was in a desperate situation, Fang Xinjiang had already completed the battle between the first prince and Alexander. He turned into a stream of sword light and pierced into the sky above the great western region. Almost at the instant he arrived in the great western region, he had already clashed into layers of chaotic air currents. The power of these chaotic air currents took effect directly on the microscopic world. Even when performing the light pursuit sword technique, Fang Xinjiang was unable to disregard them. Only the infiltrating void sword intense that he had slashed out could make use of space transmission to disregard them. However, his body was unable to do so. However, with the reinforcement from the light pursuit sword technique, Fang Xinjiang made a rapid turn and skimmed across the low sky. All physical matter before him was like layers of illusions, pierced through by Fang Xinjiang. He instantly arrived in the sky above the Great Western Region Academy and merged with Fang Xinjiang, who had 20% of his powers. In that instant, his battle prowess increased by multiple times. Seeing a stream of sword light cutting across the sky and merging with Fang Xinjiang, true Lord Qingshan's eyelids twitched fiercely. A bunch of trash. In the next moment, his palms pressed down fiercely, once again sending the chaotic air currents crashing down. He wanted to kill Fang Xinjiang in a single blow. Unfortunately, it was too late. Fang Xinjiang's two streams of power blended together in an instant. 50% of the power was enough to activate more of the fairy-slaying sword formation's magical effects. Almost in an instant, the sword shadow suddenly disappeared. The chaotic air currents descended rapidly like a torrential downpour toward Atlantis. At the sight of this scene, true Lord Qingshan was not happy but shocked instead. Are you crazy? Fang Xinjiang, your men will all die. He couldn't understand why Fang Xinjiang had suddenly become a different person. He didn't care about the lives of his subordinates at all. If they die, you'll be buried with them. In an instant, Fang Xinjiang gave up resisting the entire yin and yang dust formation. He held the thunder tribulation with one hand while the remaining Panwei, abyss, and white bone swords turned into a sword wheel and floated behind him. He brought along a stream of sword light and shot out, dashing out toward true Lord Qingshan. Sword intense soared into the sky, and sword light flashed explosively. Compared to how he had condensed sword shadows to stare at the entire yin and yang dust formation earlier, Fang Xinjiang gave up on defense and attacked at full force. Holding the thunder tribulation, he brought along a myriad of lightning bolts. Wherever the all-conquering sword passed by, the chaotic air currents would shatter. He instantly opened up a vacuum passageway that led straight to true Lord Qingshan. It was as if a laser beam had shot through the entire cloud layer. Stop it. If you want to kill true Lord, you'll have to get past me first. Two streams of martial will, one white and one green, suddenly appear before Fang Xinjiang. They were Saint Luoluo and Grand Duke Alba. These two unrivaled experts who had been revived in the past brought along seething, chaotic air currents and stood before Fang Xinjiang. They turned into two chaotic long swords and slashed out toward Fang Xinjiang. The two of them made their moves, using chaotic air currents to propel the martial arts that they were proud of. Their battle prowess far surpassed the battle prowess they had when they were alive. Scram. However, when faced with the encirclement of the two unrivaled experts, Fang Xingjian let out an explosive bellow and spat out a stream of sword light from his mouth. The infiltrating void sword intense transmitted through space, instantly piercing through the chaotic air currents and hitting the two of them. Amidst loud bangs of explosions, the two unrivaled experts were instantly sent flying for over 1,000 kilometers. During the entire process of flying back, their bodies kept on shattering, leaving behind a myriad of star fragments that scattered down into the sky. It was as if a meteor shower had fallen over the Empire's sky. Saint Luluo and Grand Duke Alba were killed by Fang Xingjian with a single sword attack. Until the moment before their deaths, their eyes were still filled with disbelief. How is this possible? To think that he could kill us with a single sword attack in the yin and yang dust formation? Electric light flashed explosively, and the thunder tribulation in his hand shattered the chaotic air currents before him. Then Fang Xingjian continued to surge toward True Lord Qingshan. As True Lord Qingshan watched as Fang Xingjian barged in like there was no one around, a hint of panic flashed uncontrollably in his eyes. However, the panic only lasted for a moment, and True Lord Qingshan calmed down very quickly. Fang Xingjian, do you really think that I'm not a match for you? Chaotic air currents gushed forth. At the next moment, they turned into a fist that could encompass a large area of the field and smashed out toward Fang Xingjian. Three Worlds Eradication. With this punch, the Three Worlds Eradication, propelled by the chaotic air currents, was smashed out. The chaotic air currents instantly turned pitch black, as if the universe had just been created and the aura of the world's creation spread out. This was True Lord Qingshan's strongest attack. The duality minute formation was able to wipe out everything, and the Three Worlds Eradication was able to destroy all living things in the world. The concept of destroying everything in the world was combined together, killing everything that passed by at the microscopic scale. This punch could instantly kill a Tier 4 Divine level expert and deal serious injuries to a Tier 5 Divine level expert. Some of the weaker Tier 5 Divine level experts would even die under this punch. The duality minute formation's destruction went from the microscopic scale to the macroscopic scale, while the Three Worlds Eradication went from the macroscopic scale to the microscopic scale. The two of them, one inside and one outside, one big and one small, were perfectly combined by True Lord Qingshan at this moment, unleashing a destructive prowess that was several times stronger. Just from his point alone, one had to admit that True Lord Qingshan was really talented. When everyone on the ground saw this punch, their eyes were in a daze. It was as if they had just seen the scene of the world being created and the world being split apart. Everyone was immersed in the astonishment brought about by this punch. However, faced with this punch that encompassed the world and split apart the world, Fang Xingjian merely let out a cold laugh. Trash. The thunder calamity sword light flashed wildly, and Fang Xingjian collided fiercely into the Three Worlds Eradication punch. Bang! The space started to seethe intensely, and the laws of the microscopic world seemed to be shaken by the collision between the two. All the chaotic air currents in the world came to a sudden stop. At the next moment, Fang Xingjian pierced through the huge fist and turned into chaotic air currents. He appeared before True Lord Qingshan while bringing along lightning light. Wait a minute, Fang Xingjian. True Lord Qingshan immediately said anxiously through his will. He still had a bargaining chip and knew about the ancient era's relics. Even if he did not have the system, how could he be willing to die here? So noisy. Swoosh. With a single sword attack, it instantly turned into a myriad of sword light that encompassed True Lord Qingshan. In that instant, True Lord Qingshan's conjured physique was crushed into pieces by countless sword light. It was as if a piece of meat had been stirred into meat paste, turning into a myriad of green light. The myriad of green light distorted and gathered together, attempting to condense into True Lord Qingshan's appearance once again. He bellowed furiously, Fang Xingjian, you can't kill me. The seventh onslaught is about to arrive. You need my help. Swoosh. Another sword attack was sent out, and sword light pierced through void space, piercing all of the light spots. It instantly stirred the myriad of martial wills into dust once again. Don't speak. Right now, I only want to kill you. Chapter 800. Sword light filled up the sky, instantly encompassing all of true Lord Qingshan's martial will that had dissipated in the air. The violent thunder calamity pierced through the atmosphere and smashed on a true Lord Qingshan's martial will like many meteors. The glow of each stream of martial will was instantly compressed, crushed, and stirred up, eventually turning into countless light spots that scattered into the air. Fang Xingjian. The final bits of martial will gathered together with great difficulty, twisting and gathering like many small bugs. The glow was so weak that it was not even comparable to that of a firefly. It barely formed true Lord Qingshan's face. Right now, his eyes were filled with terror and regret. At the final moment of his life, he finally regained his clarity of mind because he did not have the system. Wait a minute. However, at the next moment, the thunder calamity completely pierced through true Lord Qingshan's final bit of martial will. It was as if a watermelon had been crushed in an instant, and the final bit of will exploded and dissipated into the air. At the same time that he thrusted out the final sword attack, Fang Xingjian's figure flashed once again. He cut across the sky like a bolt of lightning, descending toward the ground. Just as he consecutively killed Saint Luluo, Grand Duke Alba, and true Lord Qingshan, the chaotic air currents that had lost control were already less than 50 meters away from the ground. Looking at the plunging sky, everyone looked on in a daze, with only despair left in their eyes. They just stared blankly at this magnificent scene, as if they were attracted by this magnificent scene. The wind pressure continued to be compressed and swept onto the ground by the chaotic air currents. The entire world was only left with a tremendous force of 50 meters. Everyone had a feeling of suffocation, allowing the strong gales to blow onto their bodies and faces. It's over. We're all going to die. Someone save me. I don't wish to die. This continued until a loud sound rang out from the void space in the distance, rousing everyone from their stupor. Bang! It was as if two mountain ranges had collided, or as if meteors in the sky had collided into an ice mountain. The intense sound seemed to want to spread through the entire Great Western region, entering everyone's ears. Even countless apprentice-level commoners fainted from this collision. Amidst this world-shaking collision sound, the plunging sky came to a stop. The boundless chaotic airflow floated in the air 50 meters above the ground. It was a terrifying sight to behold. In the next moment, a beam of sword light shot up into the sky. It was as if a giant had slashed at the sky with a sword. A huge crack appeared in the chaotic air currents in the sky. With an explosive rumble, the sword light exploded out like countless thunderbolts. In that instant, the chaotic air currents in the entire sky were split up by the myriad of sword light. In the end, they turned into countless clouds and rose up into the sky, slowly returning to the microscopic world and dissipating from everyone's gazes. Tyrant looked at the chaotic air currents which had disappeared in the sky, let out a breath, and said, "Was that Xingjian?" The fourth prince also relaxed. "It's him, but I feel a little different. But at least it's settled." A few minutes later, the entire Great Western City and the Academy erupted in cheers, as if rejoicing that they had survived. Elsewhere, the fifth prince's actual body and clone had already reunited. He had gathered 100% of his powers and arrived at the Sand Country. Right now, his cultivation was already at Tier 2 of the divine level. Moving at close to light speed, he arrived at the Sand Country's capital in the blink of an eye. This was a city located in an oasis in the desert. The entire city was like a small island, situated in a huge lake. It was an extremely bright lake. One could not even see the end of the lake when standing by the shore. It even gave off the misconception that it was an ocean. This was the birthplace of the Sand Country, the location known as the Origin Sea. In the center of the Origin Sea was a small island with an area of several hundred square kilometers. On the small island was the Sand Country's capital. Legend had it that the entire Origin Sea and the small island had been created by the Sand Country's first leader, the heavenly monarch of the Blood Sea. Thereafter, each generation of Sand Country's leaders would need to maintain the Origin Sea's condition all year round. It was because this man-made inland lake was created by the unrivaled cultivation of a divine-level expert, moving the Earth's veins and condensing water vapor. Only a divine-level expert would be able to possess such unbelievable power. The fifth prince had fled to the Sand Country in order to hide from Feng Xingjian. This was a path of retreat that he had prepared long ago. Once the plan to surround and kill him failed, he would flee to the ends of the desert and join the Sand Country. After all, he possessed unrivaled martial arts and also possessed many secrets regarding the ancient path of hell and the Krieg royal family. To the current leader of the Sand Country, the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch, taking in the fifth prince was more beneficial than detrimental. Therefore, the fifth prince had spent a total of about 4 seconds from the moment his clone escaped to the moment his two bodies merged together. His powers recovered to 100%, traversing across 1,000 leagues, crossing the desert, and arriving in the sky above the Origin Sea. This was also because he had spent some time thinking and recognizing the path. Otherwise, with his Tier 2 divine-level ability to move at akin to light speed, he would be able to move even faster. However, just as he arrived in the sky above the Origin Sea, a stream of sword light cut across the sky. Feng Xingjian had arrived. Almost at the instant he saw the sword light, the fifth prince's entire body was already flashing explosively with black light as he went all out in defending. It was because he knew that under light speed attacks, when he used his naked eye and not his martial will to see the other party, it would mean that it was already too late. It was because observation with the naked eye relied on the reflection of light rays. Therefore, when one used the naked eye to observe the existence of light speed, they would only be able to see the past. Therefore, the fifth prince's reaction was very fast. Almost at the instant he saw the sword light, black martial will gushed out, encompassing every single physical particle on his body. Concurrently, Feng Xingjian had already pierced his sword into the fifth prince's body. The abyss brought along the infiltrating void sword intense, cutting across space and piercing through the fifth prince's body like an illusion. Although the fifth prince's powers had already protected his entire body, the difference between their cultivation was far too great. Almost at the same time the sword pierced out, sword chi swam around the fifth prince's entire body. 10,000 streams of blood swords shot out concurrently, and a large hole exploded in the fifth prince's chest. He plunged toward the Sand Country's capital like a falling plane. When Feng Xingjian landed 300 meters above the Sand Country's capital, a transparent barrier instantly lit up. The entire barrier encompassed the capital like a bubble. When the fifth prince landed on the barrier, the rapid pressure caused the barrier to cave in. It was as if there was a finger that kept on pressing down on the bubble. It was only when the bubble caved in to an extreme, causing people to wonder if it would shatter at any moment, that the fifth prince came to a stop, covered in blood. This instantly alarmed countless experts in the entire Sand Country's capital. Streams of auras soared into the sky, and waves of martial will broke through the cloud layers, all of them dashing out toward Feng Xingjian, who was in the sky. Chapter 801. The Sand Country was located at the end of the desert in the east of the empire. It was a country that had risen up in the desert. This country had been ruled by the Sacred Fire Order all year round. Although it was called the Sand Country, it was actually an amalgamation of countless tribes, ethnic groups, and small countries under the Sacred Fire Order's rule. The size of the entire Sand Country was about twice that of the empire. However, as most of the areas were in a desert environment that was difficult to survive in, they were inferior to the empire in terms of population, resources, and national power. Despite this, The countless ethnic groups in the desert had reproduced for several thousand years and still possessed a background that was not inferior to the empires. This was especially the case in the desert. The people here were valiant and had strong battle prowess. Countless people lived a life of bloodshed, so their pursuit of martial prowess was even stronger. Right now, in the Sand Country's capital, there were several tens of thousands of cultivators and countless high-ranking members of the Sacred Fire Order gathered. Almost at the moment when Feng Xingjian and the Fifth Prince arrived in the sky above the capital, someone had already noticed the abnormality. When Feng Xingjian seriously injured the Fifth Prince with a single sword attack, countless experts soared into the sky. The first person to soar into the sky was a man with a muscular physique covered in golden fur. His face and chest were covered in scars. This man gave off the feeling that he was like a sandstorm in the desert. Before he even got close, there was already a sharp and hot feeling. Someone immediately gasped. That's the Golden Sand Tribe's erupting Sand King. The erupting Sand King is here. The guy's dead meat. Is that guy in the sky someone from the Empire? To think that he dares to launch a surprise attack on our capital single-handedly. He's really courting death. The Golden Sand Tribe was a tribe that was famous for being warlike in the Sand Country. Killing, plundering, and enslaving were their creed. In the desert, countless small countries and tribes would tremble in fear before the Golden Sand Tribe, terrified of their martial prowess. Countless people had their possessions confiscated and their clans wiped out, and their livestock, women, and children were plundered. The Golden Sand Tribe's strongest expert, the erupting Sand King, was one of the 7 divine level experts in the Sand Country. With his cultivation, he dominated the desert and had destroyed countless ethnic groups and civilizations in the desert. He was an existence that could stop children from crying at night. It was said that he had over 100,000 slaves in his royal court, and there were over 5,000 female slaves in his harem. All of them were top-notch beauties that the various clans and countries had submitted to him. Out of the 7 divine level experts in the Sand Country, he was the most terrifying and infamous one. The Sandstorm King was not the only one who appeared. At the same time that the beast-like man appeared, another beautiful young woman rose into the sky from the other side of the city. It was a woman wearing extremely revealing clothes that only covered a small part of her chest and buttocks. Large areas of her snow-white skin were exposed, especially her pair of round soft breasts, delicate waist, and slender and firm thighs. All of them were filled with the fatal allure of a woman. As soon as the woman appeared, it caused countless people in the city to exclaim. Countless men stared blankly at the beautiful figure in the sky, almost drooling. In particular, the woman's every move had a kind of charm that could turn all living things upside down. It made people's hearts itch even more. It's the heavenly dance monarch. She really is an outstanding beauty, as expected of the number 1 beauty in our Sand Country. That's right. To think that I have the honor of seeing the heavenly dance monarch's true appearance today. Even if I were to die right now, I'd be willing. In a bustling market in the northeast of the Sand Country's capital, a few men and women from the Empire were also looking at the situation in the sky in astonishment. One of the women asked, "Leader, what's the background of the heavenly dance monarch?" The person she addressed as leader was a middle-aged man with a weather-beaten face. Hearing the young lady's question, he let out a breath and said, "The heavenly dance monarch is one of the 7 divine level experts in the Sand Country. She's also the oldest, youngest, and most mysterious one." What? The young lady looked at the charming heavenly dance monarch in disbelief, feeling that her brain was not enough to comprehend what was going on. This group of men and women were members of the Empire's intelligence department. They were stationed in the desert all year round, disguised as merchants, and probed and gathered information about the Sand Country. The young lady was a new member sent out by the Empire. She had just reported in not too long ago and was not familiar with the situation in the Sand Country. The leader sighed and said, "We don't know what kind of secret arts the heavenly dance monarch has. She's already over 250 years old, but she's still alive. This has already surpassed the age that a divine level expert should have." Her legends have been circulating throughout the desert, and countless people in the Sand Country treat her as a real god. They even build temples for her and offer sacrifices to her every year. He then lifted his head and looked at Feng Xingjian, who was in the sky, and said, "The heavenly dance monarch and the erupting sand monarch are both extremely powerful. However, this isn't the most dangerous thing. This is the Sand Country's headquarters. Why is this person so ungrateful? To think that he would charge straight into the Sand Country's capital? How many experts are there here? Even if His Majesty were to come, it would probably be hard for him to escape unscathed." That's Feng Xingjian. The young lady had set off from the Empire 1.5 months ago. She then crossed the desert and arrived in the Sand Country. Clearly, she had heard of the information regarding Feng Xingjian. It was just that as a long time had passed, she was not too sure about it. Feng Xingjian? The leader's eyes lit up. Is he our #1 sword arts genius? The genius who has defeated the school of sword arts supreme chief, the undying Xia, the blue sacred moonlight, and even the first prince? Although the leader did not know much about Feng Xingjian's latest battle achievements, he had heard a little about Feng Xingjian's impressive battle achievements of defeating divine-level experts in the past. However, at the thought of this, his frown deepened. Why has he barged in single-handedly? He's too rash. Even if he has extraordinary talent and has already stepped into the divine level, it'll be hard for him to fight against so many people. Putting aside the fact that the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch is in the capital, even the Heavenly Dance Monarch and the Erupting Sand King are not easy to deal with. Moreover, the entire capital is protected by the Sacred Fire Order's formation. Hearing this, the others also looked worriedly at Feng Xingjian, who was in the sky. As the Empire's intelligence personnel, they naturally leaned towards Feng Xingjian, who was also from the Empire. They could not bear to see such an outstanding genius from the Empire fall here. However, they also knew that their leader's analysis was not wrong. The Sand Country's capital could be said to be filled with experts, and it was also protected by a formation that had been accumulated for several centuries. It would be extremely difficult for people from the outside world to attack in. The few of them communicated through information currents, and they finished exchanging information almost instantly. Concurrently, the Erupting Sand King's marshal will also extend it out like a sandstorm, containing his extremely arrogant disposition. Someone from the Empire, to think that you dare to hover in the sky above our capital by yourself? If we allow you to return alive, the entire Sand Country will be too embarrassed to face others. He clenched his fists tightly, and his entire body showed signs of turning into sand. Kneel down and become my slave. I'll give you a chance to lick the soles of my feet. Chapter 802. Among the many countries and tribes in the desert, many of them still maintain the slavery system. To aristocrats, letting their slaves kneel down and lick their feet was the greatest gift they could give to their slaves. However, when the Erupting Sand King said these words to Feng Xingjian, it was an insult. It was also a common way of insulting aristocrats in the desert. However, regardless of whether it was the Erupting Sand King who had said these words, the Heavenly Dance Monarch who was standing at the side, or the countless experts of the Sand Country in the capital, none of them were surprised when they heard these words. Instead, they felt that it was only natural. After all, this was the Sand Country's capital. It had the most superior environment in the entire desert, and countless desert aristocrats, tribal leaders, princes, and aristocrats resided here. At least 1/3 of the Sand Country's experts were currently in the capital. This is the jewel of the desert. There are as many experts as there are hairs on a cow here. There are at least 3 divine-level experts holding down the fort here. Moreover, the cult master is here as well. Similar thoughts seethed in the minds of countless people. They looked at Feng Xingjian, who was in the sky, like they were looking at a clown. The Erupting Sand King's eyes were filled with mockery, while the Heavenly Dance Monarch's gaze did not waver. She looked at Feng Xingjian like she was looking at a rock. The eyes of the intelligence team from the Empire lowered, filled with pity. Fang Xingjian, you're too rash. Almost no one thought that the man in the sky still had any hope of barging into the Sand Country's capital and entering the jewel of the desert. Countless people looked at Fang Xingjian, who was in the sky, with pride, pity, or amusement. Only the countenance of the fifth prince, who had crashed into the depression in the light screen, changed drastically. He grabbed onto the light screen with both hands, trying hard to compress it while emitting his martial will and information. Idiot, let me in quickly. The erupting Sand King and the heavenly dance monarch had soared into the sky and arrived outside the formation of the Sand Country's capital, facing Fang Xingjian. To the fifth prince, this was like the Calabash brothers queuing up to die in order to save their grandfather. Everything happened in an instant. Just as the erupting Sand King had insulted Fang Xingjian, just as everyone's thoughts were seething, and just as the fifth prince had issued his warning, Fang Xingjian extended his hand and grabbed at the erupting Sand King. You're quite straightforward with your words. In that case, you'll pay me back with the rest of your life. The moment he stretched out his palm, it immediately brought with it a power that filled up the heavens and the earth and came crashing down. In particular, there were four sword intents flashing about in his palm. They were none other than the infiltrating void, light pursuit, all-conquering, and instant sword intents. The four types of sword intents formed the celestial eradication sword formation and gathered in Fang Xingjian's palm, exuding waves of profound waves. They were the profoundness of electromagnetic forces, gravity, and strong forces. It was as if Fang Xingjian was holding onto a world in his palm. Facing Fang Xingjian's palm, the erupting Sand King's expression became extremely solemn. So, it's a deity-level expert? No wonder you have the guts to come here alone. But where do you think this is? Even if Alexander dares to come alone, he will still die. Waves of martial will that were like a sea of sand shot out from the erupting Sand King's body, and his entire body even turned into sand. This meant that his physical body and will had completely merged into one, turning into an existence with a conjured physique. This was a characteristic of a Tier 3 divine level expert. The martial will that was like the yellow sand in the sky turned into a huge palm. Before it even got close, there was already a scorching feeling gushing out, and the moisture in the air disappeared rapidly. If it was not because the entire desert capital was protected by formation, the entire capital would probably dry up and turn into a desert within a few minutes. This was the erupting Sand King's famous ultimate skill, Desert Hell. When used in this desert environment, its prowess was extremely great. The erupting Sand King had once wiped out an entire tribe with a single attack, turning 50,000 desert warriors into dried corpses. At the next moment, the two huge palms collided fiercely. However, it was like a diamond colliding against tofu. The yellow sand in the sky was instantly smashed up by Fang Xingjian's palm. Under countless astonished gazes, the yellow sand in the sky was smashed up by a single palm, leaving the erupting Sand King flying out with his shattered body. How is this possible? Even a Tier 4 divine level expert wouldn't be able to defeat me with a single attack like this. Who on earth are you? The erupting Sand King looked at Fang Xingjian in disbelief, unable to believe everything that had happened before his eyes. Simultaneously, his body kept on shattering and breaking down at an accelerated rate. This palm attack from Fang Xingjian had clearly severed all of his life force. At the sight of this scene, the heavenly dance monarch's countenance changed drastically. Even though the erupting Sand King was not a match for her, he was not too far off from her in terms of strength. To think that he had been killed with a single attack. How terrifying was he? Without much time to think, she retreated into the formation with a flash of light. Simultaneously, after Fang Xingjian's palm attack, the world changed, and 4 streams of sword light soared into the sky. They were the Abyss Sword, Thunder Calamity Sword, Panway Sword, and Whitebone Sword. The 4 long swords flew out in 4 directions, surrounding Fang Xingjian. They brought along seething lightning, spatial ripples, and a myriad of sword light, turning into the celestial eradication sword formation and instantly encompassing the area within a range of 100,000 meters. The sword formation circled above the formation of the desert capital, pressing together with the formation and colliding with each other. Occasionally, colorful and smooth explosions would erupt, as if there were a myriad of nuclear missiles exploding simultaneously. However, the explosions were fended off by the two great formations. Seeing the two great formations pressing and colliding with each other, the countenances of everyone in the city changed drastically once again. The formation in the sky above the city kept on twisting and changing. It was like a spring that wanted to bounce back. However, the celestial eradication sword formation was like a majestic mountain range, pressing down steadily in midair. It was like the Hulk was pressing down on the Black Widow, causing the entire formation to be unable to move. The citizens of the Sand Country who live in the capital had always been proud of their city, and the formation in the sky above the capital had protected the entire city time and time again. However, not only had the erupting Sand King been killed with a single strike, but the city protection formation that the Sand Country citizens were so proud of was also being suppressed by the other party single-handedly. How could the crowd not be frightened when they saw this? However, at the next moment, this astonishment and fear turned into soaring vengeance and fury. Fang Xingjian had killed the erupting Sand King with a single palm before almost all the citizens and members of the upper echelon in the desert capital, and he was even thinking of suppressing the city protection formation. This was a humiliation to the entire Sand Country, let alone the many tribes in the Sand Country, who were extremely bloodthirsty. It was as if the United States fighter jets had flown one round in the sky above Beijing and even bombed a building. A bearded man dressed in white robes glared furiously at Fang Xingjian, who was in the sky. Explosive sounds rang out from all the joints throughout his body, and his white robes were torn apart. He bellowed furiously, "Man from the Empire, you've killed our erupting Sand King and humiliated our city. I won't rest until you're dead. I won't rest until you're dead." Another man stood up and bellowed furiously, "No matter who you are, no matter what remarkable abilities you have, everyone in our Sand Country will fight it out with you to the death today. Everyone, we mustn't let this thief escape. Even if I have to give up my life, I'll kill him. I won't rest until I'm dead. I won't rest until I'm dead. I won't rest until I'm dead." Chapter 803. The entire city seemed to be burning up. Countless shouts gradually gathered together, seeming to want to shake the mountains and rivers and tear apart the clouds and sky. A fervent will spreading out in the sky above the entire city. The people from the Empire's intelligence team stood in the market. Sensing the fervent aura in the surroundings, their countenances changed drastically. All of the Sand Country's merchants in the surroundings seemed to have turned into wolves. Even the people from the intelligence team could sense countless sharp gazes piercing into them. They were also from the Empire, and the gazes from the surroundings seemed to want to kill them at the very next moment. This is bad. This Fang Xingjian has stirred up a hornet's nest. Even if he can escape, we'll be dead for sure. The countenances of a few of the Empire's intelligence team members turned pale as they picked up their weapons, seeming to be prepared to fight at any moment. The team leader raised his head and looked at Fang Xingjian, who was in the sky. He sighed inwardly. Even if you can kill the erupting Sand King with a single strike, will you be able to escape the pursuit of the entire Sand Country? At the thought of the information regarding the entire Sand Country and the many famous experts of the Sand Country appeared in his mind, his countenance turned increasingly grim. The Sand Country spanned across the entire eastern desert region and had a legacy of several thousand years of civilization. The foundation of this civilization was not much weaker than that of the Empire. Moreover, the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch, the strongest expert in this civilization, was a legendary Tier 5 divine level expert. However, Fang Xingjian only threw a casual glance toward the enraged people and then turned his gaze toward the fifth prince. The countenance of the fifth prince, who was encompassed by the celestial eradication, sword formation, and pressed down at the bottom, instantly turned pale. Feng Xingjian looked at the fifth prince coldly and said slowly, "I said 5 seconds. Close to 10 seconds have passed. Have you thought of your last words?" The fifth prince's face twitched fiercely, and his eyes were filled with craziness, regret, and terror. "Old sacred fire, if you dare to watch me die, then you can forget about knowing the secrets of the ancient path of hell forever." Feng Xingjian let out a cold snort. With a single thought, endless sword light descended toward the fifth prince. At this most dangerous moment in his life, the fifth prince unleashed all of his potential. The fifth prince's entire body flickered with black flames, and amidst the extreme distortions in space, he punched out, turning into a spiral space and smashing out. It was another 3 realms annihilation, but this time it had a new breakthrough in its control over spatial distortions. The entire space continued to spiral and twist, deflecting all the attacks in front of it. It broke through the sword light that filled the sky and pierced straight towards Feng Xingjian. I broke through. Amidst extreme fury, terror, and regret, the fifth prince relied on his best fist art in the world and finally attained another breakthrough. The prowess of the 3 worlds' eradication increased once again, reaching the limits of spatial distortions below Tier 5 of the divine level. It could almost distort and tear apart any pure shock waves or heat energy attacks. You've broken through? Feng Xingjian's gaze flickered. He had naturally sensed the changes in the fifth prince. With a slight flick of his finger, the surrounding sword light turned into light and shot out. At the next moment, a stream of light pursuit sword intent pierced through the fifth prince's fist, instantly tearing off his entire right arm. The fifth prince, who had yet to completely attain his conjured physique, instantly bled profusely. Fresh blood spurted out like a fountain, bringing with it a rain of blood as he landed on the light screen. Immediately after, a myriad of sword light flashed in the sky, wanting to dismember the fifth prince completely. "No, I don't want to die. I've just comprehended a higher realm in fist arts. I still have the world's best fist arts talent. Give me another month, and I'll be able to strive for Tier 3 or even Tier 4 of the divine level. How can I die? How can I die?" Under the crazy will to survive, the fifth prince unleashed his final burst of potential. His black martial will seem to have turned into a huge demonic face that bellowed crazily in midair. At the next moment, the fifth prince stood up and punched out with his undamaged left arm. At the instant he punched out, his entire body started to burn up crazily. At this moment, all the physical particles in his body started to burn up fiercely, releasing energy incessantly. Under the repeated pressure, the fifth prince had almost squeezed out his talent to an extreme. Right now, he was even welcoming his second breakthrough. He burned the physical particles in his body and stimulated the powers of the microscopic world in his body. At this moment, he started to advance toward the microscopic world from his means of spatial distortions, which was the microscopic realm. Feng, Xing, Jian, 3 worlds eradication, self-destruction realm. With a punch, the atmosphere seemed to be seething and burning. At this moment, the fifth prince's spirit, will, and physical body were all burning up. The physical particles throughout his body unleashed seething powers, even causing the powers of the microscopic world to be slightly released. This allowed this punch to reach a realm that he had never reached before. At this moment, I am at my strongest. However, it was only after forcefully stepping into the microscopic realm that the fifth prince suddenly felt despair. It was because his martial will could sense that all the physical particles within a range of 100,000 meters were seething incessantly. His opponent's countless sword forces were moving about and sweeping through the microscopic world. If it was said that the fifth prince had felt that the Feng Xingjian he saw earlier was Dugu Qiubai, then now that he had forcefully stepped into the microscopic realm and looked at the Feng Xingjian, he felt as if he was looking at Frisia. This might be a realm that I'll never be able to reach in my entire life. With extreme despair, the fifth prince sent out his final attack, and his body was instantly engulfed by sword light. A short moment later, over 80% of the fifth prince's body was shattered. However, he still managed to survive amidst a stretch of white flames. High up in the sky, a human figure formed from pure, white flames blocked the fifth prince's path. The Sacred Fire Order's patriarch, who was the strongest expert in the Sand Country and had the strength of a Tier 5 divine level expert, had finally appeared. Fang Xingjian, how dare you make a move in my territory? Do you really want to die that much? Almost at the instant the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch appeared, the entire city broke out in cheers. Countless experts in the Sand Country admired and believed in this spiritual leader of the entire desert. The Sacred Fire Order was the greatest religion in the desert, and almost 3/4 of the population believed in this religion. Moreover, when the country was being humiliated and its heroes were being killed, this strongest expert had appeared. As the leader of the Sacred Fire Order, the patriarch was said to be a god who walked amongst the mortals. Countless people believed that he was a half-human, half-god, and an invincible existence. He was also the reason why the people in the city still dared to call out for Fang Xingjian's death after seeing the Desert Storm King being killed with a single attack. Therefore, at the moment when the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch appeared, the entire city burst into an uproar. "Kill him, Lord Patriarch! Burn this heretic to death! Burn this heretic to death!" Maniacal shouts rang out, and the entire city was like a bucket of boiling water, seething intensely. Chapter 804. Looking at the seething desert capital, the fifth prince was stunned for a moment before he smiled at the next moment. He looked at Fang Xingjian, who was in the sky, and thought coldly, "Fang Xingjian, even though your sword arts are world-shaking, you've already made an enemy out of the entire empire. Do you dare to make an enemy out of the entire Sand Country? Even if you can defeat my father, there's no way you'll be able to kill me in the Sand Country's territory with the help of the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch and the city's protective formation that has been passed down for several centuries." The Sand Country's overall strength was slightly inferior to the Empire's. However, the Sacred Fire Order had plundered the entire desert and enslaved millions and millions of people for countless years. Their accumulations far surpassed that of the Krieg royal family. At this moment, the fifth prince relaxed, feeling extremely thankful that he had managed to keep his life. "Thankfully, I made preparations and contacted the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch. Otherwise, I'd really be dead this time around. Moreover, even if he wants to continue with the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch and the formation in the desert capital, it'll be impossible for him to kill me." Simultaneously, the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch took a step forward, and a myriad of white flames rose up. The entire formation in the desert capital was completely activated under the patriarch's control, and endless flames extended out from the light screen. These flames gathered in the sky, forming an upside-down city that hung in the sky. The light screen that protected the entire capital seemed to have turned into a mirror. Below the mirror was the jewel of the desert, the Sand Country's capital. A city of flames hung upside down above the mirror. It was no different from the entire desert capital, as if it was a copy of the city reflected in the mirror. The only difference was that this upside-down city was completely formed from flames. The Sacred Fire Order's patriarch had used the powers of the entire formation to activate his divine country, the Great Radiant World. Endless flames danced to and fro. This was a combination of 49 types of sacred flames and the 9 great divine flames that the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch had left behind in the headquarters. It could be said to have the ability to split the world apart and create and destroy the world. At this moment, the Great Radiant World borrowed the power of the entire capital to appear in the material world. It was like a heavenly palace hanging upside down in the sky, and the surging firepower and energy within it was a terrifying number. It was estimated to be able to supply demonic city with electricity for several hundred years. With the appearance of the great radiant world, the crowd in the capital city also broke into a commotion. Countless people revealed expressions of admiration as they dropped to their knees and prostrated on the ground, offering up all their faith to the sacred Fire Order's patriarch. Similar to the formation of the Full Moon Shrine, the reason why the Sacred Flame Order wanted to set up a religion was, on one hand, to unify the thoughts of the desert tribes so that it would be easier to govern them. On the other hand, it was because the founder, the Heavenly Lord of the Blood Sea, had a set of methods to collect the information currents scattered by humans. He collected all the thoughts of worship and belief and used them as energy. With the appearance of the great radiant world, countless people prostrated themselves on the ground. The entire flaming city of the great radiant world burned even more fiercely, as if a basin of oil had been poured onto a raging fire. Sensing that overwhelming power, the confidence in the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch's gaze grew even stronger. Previously, when the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch fought against Feng Xingjian, he had only relied on his own powers. This time around, the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch was backed by the Sand Country's capital, the Sacred Fire Order's headquarters. The formation that had been erected there for several centuries was the result of the hard work of several generations of the Sacred Fire Order's leaders, as well as countless heavenly and earthly treasures from across the entire desert. Right now, the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch's battle prowess was at least 3 times stronger than when he had first met Feng Xingjian. Therefore, he was filled with confidence right now. At this moment, it's impossible for Feng Xingjian to defeat me in our sect's headquarters. The patriarch's eyes narrowed slightly, and thoughts kept on churning in his mind. Then, should I take this opportunity to kill him? The Sacred Fire Order's patriarch felt that there was definitely a secret for Feng Xingjian to be able to raise his strength to such a level within a mere 3 years. If he could get his hands on this secret, just the thought of it made the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch feel a little agitated. Moreover, the fact that Feng Xingjian had taken the initiative to chase him to the Sacred Fire Order's headquarters was a heaven-sent opportunity to the patriarch. Therefore, after taking a step forward, he said directly, "Feng Xingjian, kneel down and surrender. Be my Sacred Fire Order's slave for 100 years, and I can spare your life." As he spoke, the great radiant world pressed down, and violent heat waves gushed forth, as if wanting to incinerate the entire city. Countless sparks turned into many huge dragons that seethed to and fro. In the blink of an eye, they encompassed the area within a range of several tens of kilometers. The great radiant world, which was hanging upside down in the sky, and the capital's formation came pressing down from above and below. It was as if there was a huge, invisible mouth that held the celestial eradication sword formation within. It kept on squeezing and rubbing against each other, clashing in void space time and time again. It was as if a 100,000-ton aircraft carrier was being smashed into the ground time and time again. Right now, not only was the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch extremely powerful and unfathomable, but he also had the Sacred Fire Order's secret legacy, the inextinguishable conjured physique. With the Sacred Fire Order's 1,000-year faith, he was able to regenerate endlessly. Right now, in the sky above the desert capital, the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch had an inextinguishable body. Therefore, he was even more fearless. The overwhelming prowess he displayed in this instant far surpassed that of when true Lord Qingshan was controlling the duality minute formation earlier. However, Feng Xingjian's gaze swept out toward the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch, the 5th prince, and the entire city. Within a range of 100,000 meters, there was enmity toward him everywhere. The entire city and all the people in the city wanted to kill him. The 5th prince's eyes were filled with rejoicing over his misfortune, while the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch's gaze was filled with endless confidence, as if the situation was under his control. Throwing a glance toward everyone present, Feng Xingjian put out a finger gently, and a stream of sword light lit up on his fingertip like a rising sun. At the next moment, a myriad of sword light swept out toward the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch. Faced with a myriad of sword light, the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch's conjured physique kept on retreating, trembling, and scattering everywhere. It was like a flame that had been extinguished, continuously being slashed and weakened by the sword light. However, no matter how he was attacked, at the moment when the flames were about to be extinguished, they would once again strengthen, rise, and return to their original state. It's useless, Fang Xinjian. The Sacred Fire Order's patriarch laughed out loud and said, "My inextinguishable conjured flames are truly an inextinguishable body. You won't be able to kill me." As he spoke, the great radiant world in the sky came pressing down explosively. The entire city of flames came pressing down like a mountain pressing down. The ferocious aura caused the countenances of everyone in the city to change. This was despite the fact that the great radiant world's target was not them. Fang Xinjian, who was the first to be affected, also seemed to be scared silly. He looked at the great radiant world that came pressing down in a daze, not reacting at all. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.